Chapter 273, Subdue. Thinking of it, He frowned until she suddenly felt Nangong Yu lightly scrape the tip of her nose, his voice filled with a teasing tone as he smiled. Little fool, of course, it's not easy for other people to subdue spiritual demon plants, but you have something they like the most, spiritual spring water. Don't tell me you still don't know how to bargain with them? When she heard that, He was unable to refute Nangong Yu and quickly spread out her left hand. In an instant, spiritual spring water started to slowly condense in her delicate white palm. Sure enough, once the purple abyss vine sensed the rich and fragrant spiritual energy, it immediately climbed up and wrapped itself around He's arm like a child wanting to grab spiritual food. While the purple abyss vine was greedily absorbing the spiritual energy, Nangong Yu took advantage of the situation to immediately grab He's right hand and gently bite one of her fingers. The scarlet blood then seeped out to slowly drip onto the purple abyss vine. In a split second, an intense violet light constantly pulsed around the vines, causing them to stand up straight and make a rustling sound. It was almost like it was angry and tried to resist by desperately struggling. He's eyes frosted over and she coldly said, "You wanted spiritual spring water, so naturally you have to pay the price. I, He, hereby promise that as long as you become my spirit pet, in the future I'll allow you to drink as much ninth secluded spirit spring water as you want." After she finished speaking, the purple abyss vine suddenly stopped shaking and struggling. Yet the leaves still continued to move and make a rustling sound like it was in an intense discussion. Eventually, all of the purple abyss vine stopped swaying and it moved in front of He. Her blood, including the spiritual spring water on her palm, slowly disappeared into the purple abyss vine's body. The next moment, a violet light gleamed on her palm. The mark of a purple vine then flashed before it slowly disappeared from view. He used her divine sense to internally inspect her body and found that the purple abyss vine really was residing within her. Focusing her mind and stretching out her right hand, she watched as a purple vine was instantly released and hit a huge rock on one side of the cave. In the blink of an eye, the huge rock was crushed into dust. This process was extremely fast and the sound was very faint, so if you weren't watching carefully, it would have been easy to miss it. All it took was the flash of a purple light, and it looked like the huge rock was shattered due to the weather. He was satisfied as she returned the purple abyss vine into her body. She found that the purple abyss vine could freely lengthen and shorten according to her thoughts, and moreover, its speed was extremely fast. It was definitely more effective to use than her previous bone whip. But while He was satisfied, the purple abyss vine within her body was very unhappy and continuously protested. Although spiritual demon plants usually couldn't speak, the owner of the contract could generally understand what they meant anyway. As a result, He felt like there was a voice in her head constantly scolding her for not keeping her word and being untrustworthy. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Focusing once more, she moved the purple abyss vine into her space, leaving only a short length of vine within her body as a weapon. However, when the purple abyss vine was moved into her space, He discovered a strange thing. She could actually see the state of her space even though she wasn't currently in it. She could even see Dandan and little golden dragon lying on the edge of the spirit spring, Dandan's broken voice ringing in her ears. Although the little golden dragon was still in a coma, she could tell that the two little guys' bodies were recovering, which made her heavy heart feel relieved. Chapter 274, The Perfect Wife. Without the purple abyss vine obstructing her sight, He could now clearly see the cave on the cliff. It was a cave made entirely out of rock, and except for the purple abyss vine, there weren't any traces of other plants or small reptiles around. The cave entrance wasn't large and only allowed for 2 people to enter at the same time, but when inside, they found that the inside was exceptionally wide. They were unsure if it was because there weren't any snakes, rats, ants, or any sort of plant, but the atmosphere inside the cave was fresh and dry. He had originally intended to bring Nangong Yu to the top of the cliff, but now it seemed that this cave that had been guarded by the purple abyss vine was more secure than an unknown cliff. It also seemed more suitable for healing. Nangong Yu brought out a huge night pearl to light up the entire cave, while He removed all the items of furniture she had stored in her space. Big items such as a large bed, table and chairs, and small items such as food, tableware, and chopsticks. Everything that a person could think of was brought out one by one. This was also the difference between He and other martial artists. An ordinary martial artist's storage space ring wasn't so large, and with only a small space, they were barely able to store treasures and medicinal pills. So why would they be willing to store such insignificant things like these? But He's space was extremely large. So even though she was removing things like the table and chairs that she had placed in a corner of the Spirit Firmament Palace, it still wasn't anywhere near full. All her things in the Spirit Firmament Palace were organized by category, so she wasn't worried at all that storing junk like this would take up the room she could use for treasure items. Since she could enjoy the pleasure of having such plentiful resources, He had never treated her people unfairly, and she was naturally willing to make her adventurous life more comfortable. He supported Nangongyu and helped him to lie on the large soft bed, but instead of cultivating right away, he chose to smile as he watched He busily moving back and forth. And as he was watching, his expression slowly became more and more gentle. When He turned around, she caught sight of Nangongyu smiling joyfully as he looked at her. With his handsome face shining under the light of the night pearl, it made him seem like a seductive demon and caused her heart to palpitate like crazy. Looking displeased, she glared at him and asked, "What are you laughing about? Didn't you say that you wanted to recover from your injury as soon as possible? Why haven't you started cultivating yet?" Nangongyu slowly sat up and faintly laughed, "Because I was reluctant to remove my eyes from you." Currently, Sheer seems like a hard-working little wife busy looking after her husband. To have such a perfect wife, this king is really blessed with the fortune of 3 lifetimes. Dream on. He grabbed one of the pillows on the bed and smacked him over the head with it. "Who's your wife?" Being heavily hit by the pillow, Nangongyu uttered a muffled groan and bowed his head in pain. It wasn't a soft cotton pillow, but rather a weighty buckwheat pillow. So although not completely convinced that the great Hell King would be hurt by a buckwheat pillow, He still couldn't help but worriedly move a few steps closer to him. "Hey, are you okay?" But before she had even finished asking, He suddenly felt a strong force grab her, and for a moment, she felt herself spinning in the air. Once she recovered her sense of balance, she realized that she had been dragged onto the bed by Nangongyu and was now firmly pinned beneath him. Nangongyu gazed down at her while the two of them were so close together, and within Nangongyu's pitch-black eyes, it seemed like there was a brightly burning flame. Being watched like that caused He to be flustered, and she moved her hands and feet to struggle free. However, purely comparing their strengths, she was nowhere near Nangongyu's match. She wanted to use spiritual power to free herself, but she was worried about his injuries, so she didn't dare act rashly. Unfortunately, this left her trapped in an impossible situation. Using her hands, she forcefully pushed at Nangongyu's chest and angrily shouted, "What are you doing? Quickly let me go, otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." Nangongyu bowed his head, and his black, silk-like long hair caressed the side of He's face. With the ends of his hair sweeping across the side of her face, she felt a startlingly numb feeling spread throughout her body. Chapter 275. Will never let her off. He felt her heart beating wildly in her chest and became anxious to get out of Nangongyu's arms, but then she heard his dark and husky voice slowly saying, "Never, I'll never let you go. Sheer, just accept your fate. In this life, you're mine." Nangongyu then lowered his head and slowly inched towards the soft pink cherry lips he always thought about. It was such a sweet taste, an ecstasy he felt down to his bones, and one that he had missed for many days. However, the second before his lips landed, He slightly turned her small face to the side and made his warm kiss land on a corner of her mouth. Although he had made contact with her exquisite skin and could smell her sweet fragrance, which was extremely alluring, the originally hot atmosphere in the cave was slowly becoming colder. Nangongyu could feel He's resistance and disaffection towards him. When He turned her head back, her gaze was frozen as she decisively stared at him and slowly opened her mouth to say, "Nangongyu, no matter how pleasant it is to hear your confession, there are still some things I have to tell you first. Feng Lianing, I will definitely kill her. I don't care who she is or how powerful her backers are, I absolutely refuse to let her off." One day I'll make her pay me back what she owes me 100 times. Heshi's voice was ice-cold and filled with a resolute tone. With the trace of murderous intent mixed in, it made those who had previously heard it become colder than they were before. She admitted that her current skill was inferior and that she was still unable to kill Feng Lianying, with no possible way to confront the Lu Li sect. But just because she wasn't currently capable of it, that didn't mean that it wouldn't be possible in the future. Heshi, had always paid a debt of gratitude with kindness and revenge with hatred. She wouldn't let anyone off who dared provoke her people. Even if she had to oppose Nangongyu, she still wouldn't hesitate to even the score. One day, she would establish her own power, so that the people in this world won't dare to easily humiliate her again. For all of this, she could only depend on herself and not rely on other people. Nangongyu stared in a daze at Heshi's burning and shining eyes that were like an unfathomable clear pond. They resembled an unpredictable ocean, so arrogant, so conceited, but also so completely breathtaking. This was his sheer. A complicated look flashed across Nangongyu's face, and within his deep eyes, an intense emotion was surging. After a brief internal battle, he ultimately bit his tongue to withhold the words wanting to free themselves from his mouth. Heshi wasn't surprised that Nangongyu didn't answer her, and without waiting for him to come up with excuses, she firmly pushed him off her to get up and indifferently said, "You stay in here to heal properly, I'll go guard outside." In any case, Nangongyu had sustained an injury when he'd saved her, so she would always remember this favor. Just as Heshi went to quickly leave the cave, Nangongyu's soft voice came from behind her filled with affection and sadness. "Sheer." He gently called her name twice, and then that hoarse and magnetic voice disappeared into faint sighs. He obviously didn't say anything, but Heshi felt like there was the trace of a wound on her heart. Her steps slightly faltered, and then no longer wanting to stay, she left the cave. Heshi walked out of the cave and took a deep breath, finding that it was only then that her anxiousness could calm down. Releasing the purple abyss vine, she restored it to its original form to cover the cave entrance once again. When the purple abyss vine saw Heshi, it immediately started to sway vigorously. It seemed extremely joyous but also very excited. Whether it was just an illusion, Heshi felt that even though the purple abyss vine was only in her space for a short period of time, it seemed a lot sturdier and solid. The leaves were also plumper, while its originally transparent purple stems and leaves seemed darker too. Chapter 276. The one who causes distress. Heshi watched it sway in obvious excitement, even though its thick vines were still motionless. However, she noticed that it looked as if it was eating and digesting food. A corner of Heshi's mouth twitched, and pushing aside the purple abyss vine's branch that was stretching over to fawn before her, she gave it a few orders and then entered her space. She made sure to attach a part of her divine sense to the purple abyss vine though, that way she would be able to keep a close eye on her surroundings. As soon as she entered her space, she heard the sad sobbing of Dandan. Sensing a new presence in the space, Dandan suddenly whipped his head around like a bird startled by the snapping of a twig. When he saw that it was just Heshi, he immediately leapt into her arms. "Mother, what? I thought that I'd never see you again, Mother." Dandan's cries were extremely heart-wrenching, as if he wanted to vent out all of the fear and worry that he'd been carrying these past few hours. Currently, Dandan's body had reverted back to his original appearance, but his previous round, smooth, and tender body had now become flat. His body color now also appeared a little transparent, displaying the look of one in poor health and undernourished. Heshi pinched his small round face with a sad expression on her face and reproachfully said, "In the future, you're not allowed to take your own safety as a joke, do you hear me? Even if it's to save me, you can't do it." When Dandan was still incubating, he had practically needed to absorb a city's worth of spiritual energy before he was able to break out of his shell. In fact, while his body contained an extreme amount of formidable power, that same amount of power represented his life source. If the power was ever halved and weakened, he would return to the shape of an egg and possibly even lose his life. Acting like a spoiled child, Dandan continuously rubbed his head against Heshi's chest. Seeing him ignoring her words, Heshi couldn't help but say, "Dandan, even if I die, As long as this shumi space still exists, you can survive and you won't have to return to being an egg. Once the space has a new owner, you can still live happily. You've been lonely living an egg for so many years, so do you want to become an egg again? In the future you should be obedient and avoid taking unnecessary risks. Do you understand? I don't want that. Dandan tightly clutched at Heshi's hair while his small mouth flattened into a thin line, his expression revealing his urge to cry. I don't want Mother to die, I don't want a new owner. If I saw Mother die, then Dandan would rather never come out and forever be an egg. What? Mother, don't abandon Dandan. Heshi sighed, and for a moment her heart was full of a bitter yet soft feeling. This little guy, how could it so easily make people distressed to the point that even she, with a heart of stone, couldn't help but be soft-hearted and moved? Heshi kissed his small cheek and softly said, "All right, I promise you, Dandan, that I won't die and abandon you. Dandan is a good child, so don't cry anymore, okay?" Dandan's mind was only matured to that of a 4 or 5-year-old child, so when he heard that he immediately felt happy. Clasping his cheeks that were kissed by Heshi, he continuously giggled, his little face filled with happiness and joy. However, when his gaze landed on the body of the still unconscious little golden dragon on the edge of the spirit spring, he immediately reverted back into a crying bun. Mother, why hasn't Long Long woken up yet? Is Long Long going to die? Mother, you're so powerful, so save him, okay? Carrying Dandan, Heshi made her way towards the edge of the spirit spring, and seeing the little golden dragon's body covered in cuts and bruises, her heart found it difficult to bear. She had only just formed a contract with this spirit pet, so she didn't yet have any sentimental feelings for it, and so far their interactions had been ones of looking down upon one another. However, she never would have thought that it would go to such an extent to save her. Chapter 277, Burning Heaven Realm? Divine Dragon Fruit? Just a quick look at little golden dragon's body and she could tell that he had a large burn spot, as well as a multitude of sword injuries. His originally golden yellow scales were now broken and bent out of place, while his horns were broken off at the base. With his body and flesh being so burnt in some parts, although the wounds had already stopped bleeding due to the effect of the spring water, it still looks miserable and hideous. Heshi stepped forward to examine the little golden dragon's condition and discovered that even though the water from the 9th secluded spirit spring had strong healing properties for people, it seemed that its effects on the little golden dragon weren't all that effective. Moreover, she was an expert in treating people, so she was completely unfamiliar in regards to the dragon's body structure. Also, even if she wanted to use her silver needles on his acupuncture points to see if it helped heal him, it would be impossible. The little golden dragon's breathing was currently very weak, while his initially arrogant and haughty eyes were now tightly closed. Heshi peeled one of his eyelids back to take a look and found that the pupil seemed slightly dilated. In any case, this wasn't a good sign. Her brows creased tightly and Dandan, who stood on the side, pulled at a corner of her clothes with an expression of hope and expectation as he looked at her. Heshi quickly took out a bunch of medicine bottles. Then she boiled together a medicinal liquid made of the medicinal pills mixed with 9th secluded spirit spring water and soaked the entirety of the little golden dragon's body in it. Due to the medicine's powerful effect, the wounds that were still seeping out blood began to completely heal, while his dark scales started to return to their previous luster. But at best, such treatment could only cure the little golden dragon's surface injuries. For his internal injuries, Heshi was helpless. The plan for now was to at least leave this secret territory earlier and then find a treatment method. Perhaps that old glutton who claimed he was Taoist spiritual master Xianqing would have a few methods to help her. Heshi was immersed in her worries when suddenly the little golden dragon's faint voice was heard. Go to the Burning Heaven Realm. Find the Divine Dragon Fruit. Burning Heaven Realm? Divine Dragon Fruit? Heshi startled when she heard this. She didn't know where the Burning Heaven Realm was, but she did know about the Divine Dragon Fruit as she had read about it before in the All Living Things record. It was a kind of spirit clan demon elixir. A martial artist's spiritual base could quickly promote after taking it, especially during the promotion period, and it could even help raise the power of their level advancement. After a demonic beast takes it, It was possible for it to enhance its abilities and restore its core. It was also said that no matter how severe the internal injury was, it could completely recover. But, according to the things written down in the All Living Things record that Heshi had seen, the divine dragon fruit was only found in the spiritual plantations of Xian Luo continent. It had never before been seen in Mi Luo continent. Going along with what the little golden dragon had said though, could she find the divine dragon fruit in Burning Heaven Realm? Little dragon, do you know where Burning Heaven Realm is? However, in response to Heshi, the little golden dragon could only breathe weakly as it had exhausted all its strength answering her a moment ago. Heshi let out a sigh and then proceeded to mix together a tub of medicinal liquid once again. Completely soaking the little golden dragon in it, she left only its little head floating above the surface. Although this concoction couldn't completely cure the little golden dragon's internal injuries, it could at least ensure that its condition wouldn't deteriorate. Dandan leaned against the edge of the tub and worriedly stared at the little golden dragon, his soft and immature voice continuously asking, "Mother, will Long Long really be fine?" Little dragon just spoke about a way to treat him, so after we leave this sealed dragon domain we'll go find the whereabouts of Burning Heaven Realm. Going to Burning Heaven Realm will be able to cure Long Long? Then that's great, Mother, we'll go immediately. The next moment, Heshi shoved something in Dandan's mouth, causing him to be unable to talk. After he had swallowed whatever was in his mouth, he exclaimed, "Mother, what was that? It's delicious." While laughing, Heshi stuffed one into the little golden dragon's mouth before she lightly said, "This is a 6th-rank demon beast's core. I'm hoping that it'll have some effect on healing the wounds you two have." A 6th-rank demon beast core contains an enormous amount of power, so you have to absorb it properly. Chapter 270, Nengong Yu was afraid? Currently, Dandan was feeling an immense amount of energy spreading throughout his body, making his previously empty stomach become warm and feel exceptionally comfortable. This feeling, compared to drinking spirit spring water and eating spiritual plants and fruits from the space, was much better. Promptly obeying Heshi, he closed eyes and began to absorb the energy. At the same time, the little golden dragon's breathing started to regulate while he was still unconscious. Watching Dandan's dried-up body slowly become rounded again, Heshi couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. So sitting cross-legged at the edge of the spring, she began to cultivate. Although she had just gotten the Maha inheritance, she was extremely interested in it. She believed that as long as she completely mastered the cultivation technique of the Maha inheritance, beating down Feng Lianying wouldn't even be an issue anymore. Time flowed and in the blink of an eye, one night had already passed. In the cave, Nangong Yu opened his eyes to examine his condition and was satisfied when he found that the injury to his meridians had nearly completed healing. His dried-up dantian had also been filled with spiritual power, while his strength was restored to at least 70%. Shear's 9th secluded spirit spring water was indeed the best healing medicine for martial artists, especially for superficial wounds and spiritual power depletion. It was simply 100 times more powerful than ordinary medicinal pills. Nangong Yu stood up and went to walk outside the cave, but just as he arrived at the entrance, his heart started palpitating. His figure suddenly rushed out, but there was only an empty area before his eyes. Apart from the occasional rustling of the purple abyss vine's leaves, Heshi was nowhere to be seen. 11er? Nangong Yu subconsciously shouted out loud, not even realizing that his voice was somewhat trembling due to fear. Why wasn't Shear here? Did she get angry and disappointed so she left, completely cutting off all ties with him? Or did she encounter danger? With these thoughts swirling around in his mind, Nangong Yu felt like his throat was being tightly clutched, making it extremely difficult to breathe. But soon, he heard a strange whistling sound, and following that, Heshi gracefully floated down from above to firmly land in front of him. When Heshi had woken up in the morning and noticed that Nangong Yu was still meditating, she had gone to the top of the cliff alone to examine it first. She had even left the purple abyss vine guarding the entrance so that when Nangong Yu awoke he would know that she hadn't just left. However, when she suddenly heard Nangong Yu shouting, she had hurriedly come back down. Heshi watched as Nangong Yu stared at her, and just as she was about to speak, Nangong Yu suddenly strode forward and pulled her into his arms. Nangong Yu's strength was tremendous, and as he pressed her body against his, it nearly crushed her bones. "It hurts." Hashi frowned and wanted to push him away, but she found that Nangong Yu was actually trembling. His body holding her was cold, unlike the scorching temperature it normally was. So even though he tried to conceal it, Hashi could still feel that his body was continuously trembling while he hugged her. Nangong Yu was afraid? What was he afraid of? Hashi was puzzled, but her body betrayed her reasoning, and reaching out her hand, she gently stroked his back as if she was comforting a child who'd been awakened by a nightmare. Her voice was gentle as she asked, "What happened?" Nangong Yu tightened his hold on her and buried his face in her hair, refusing to speak for a long while. Just as Hashi was about to ask again, Nangong Yu abruptly released her and with a gloomy voice asked, "Where did you go? Why is there such a potent smell of blood coming from your body?" His voice was full of anxiety and anger, but it was also mixed with distress and worry. Nangong Yu abruptly grabbed Hashi's hand and began to search for where she was injured. Chapter 279. "Tie you to my side." Hashi pushed him away, and with a blush covering her face she angrily said, "Where do you think you're touching? Pervert." "I'm fine. I wanted to take a look what's on the top of the cliff, and in passing I dealt with a few dark devil wolves." A dark devil wolf was a third-rank demonic beast. Although its cultivation base wasn't very high, they usually lived in packs, which meant that if you encountered one, it was the same as meeting a dozen of them. Even knowing that Hashi's current cultivation base was high enough to handle them, Nangong Yu still had some lingering fears. "Why didn't you call me?" Hashi stared at him with puzzlement. Just a moment ago fear had been plastered across his face, but now it had clearly transformed into anger. Was he bipolar? "They're nothing but third-rank demonic beasts. I can easily deal with them." After saying that, she turned towards the cave to pack up, but after barely walking 2 steps, Nangong Yu pulled her back. Hashi wanted to struggle free but found herself unable to now that Nangong Yu's strength had been restored. There was no way she could fight him. Soon, Nangong Yu's hand captured both of her wrists behind her back, while the other hand held her slender waist and firmly pressed her against his chest. "Next time, no matter what happens, don't ever leave me. Do you hear me?" Hashi angrily struggled and tried to break from his hold, but instead, she ended up being pressed tighter against him, resulting in almost no space left between the two of them. "Nangong Yu, you might as well find a rope to tie me up with at this rate." Hashi had only said that because she was furious, but when Nangong Yu heard it, his eyes instantly lit up. "Good idea." Following that, a length of finger-thick golden silk appeared in his hand, and before Hashi had time to realize what was going on, he moved to tie her hands behind her back. This was a high-level spiritual weapon called golden silk. Flying swords were unable to cut it, while water and heat weren't capable of damaging it. If she was tied by that, would she still be able to escape? Hashi struggled with all her might. "Nangong Yu, are you kidding me? Do you think I'm joking?" Nangong Yu leaned closer to her ear and whispered in a hoarse voice, "Who told you to be so disobedient, always thinking of running away from me? Instead of always worrying about your safety, it's better to tie you to my side." Hashi felt the icy cold spiritual power of the golden silk wrap around her wrists and became extremely anxious. Before, even though she had used all of her spiritual power, she still hadn't been able to break free from Nangong Yu's hands. "Sure, I can untie you, but only if you'll promise me that you stay by my side at all times." How could Hashi currently dare to argue with this crazy man? A wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him, so she hastily nodded and agreed. "All right, I'm afraid of you, so I'll promise you. Will that do? Now quickly release me." With that, Nangong Yu was satisfied and swiftly released her hands. Immediately jumping back a step, alertness and caution were on her face as she glared at him. These kinds of unyielding yet delicate eyes resembled the luminous eyes of a little leopard. Seeing them, Nangong Yu felt his mind drift away and suddenly reached out his hands to pull her towards him. Hashi abruptly felt herself moving backwards uncontrollably, and when she returned to her senses, she found herself once again in Nangong Yu's embrace. Nangong Yu lowered his head and passionately kissed her bright red lips. After a moment, once he released her lips, his voice was lower and softer, like a gentle flow of water. Sheer, I've wanted to do that since a long time ago. Hashi ferociously wiped her lips that were extremely painful from being kissed and angrily glared at him. Unfortunately, she didn't want to provoke this crazy man again, so she turned around to enter the cave. After she finished tidying up her stuff, the two quickly flew to the peak of the cliff. Yesterday, it had been Hashi carrying Nangongyu, but this time, regardless of Hashi's protests, Nangongyu had embraced her waist and carried her to the peak in only a moment. Chapter 280, Rumors. At the peak of the cliff there was a stretch of green hills, and not too far in the distance, there were the dead bodies of more than 10 dark devil wolves lying on the ground, emitting the thick smell of blood. Before Hashi had time to take the bodies of the dark devil wolves into her space, Nangongyu wanted to help her and slice downwards with his sword. Unfortunately, when his sword went to cut into the bodies of the dark devil wolves, it crushed them into dust and caused perfectly good food materials to be wasted. Hashi fiercely glared at Nangongyu, and seeing him rubbing his nose while looking helpless and awkward, she turned around and couldn't help but utter a soft laugh. She hadn't expected such an embarrassed expression on the almighty Hell King. It was so surprising that it was very cute. Hashi had barely finished sorting out what was left of the dark devil wolves and was about to call out to Nangongyu that they could depart, when she suddenly sensed something and turned to gaze towards the distant sky. A moment later, a few figures flew over and abruptly landed in front of them. Before Hashi could get a clear look at who they were, she saw a black-clothed man step forward with large strides and drop to one knee in front of Nangongyu, greeting him with clasped hands. "Master, are you all right?" The person before them was Qing Long. Of course, it wasn't only Qing Long, there were also a few bodyguards from Hell King Manor, most of them high-level Meridian stage martial artists. But what surprised Hashi the most was that Gu Lufeng and Zhou Yenin were also there. As soon as Gu Lufeng spotted Hashi, he slowly walked up to her and asked, "Little Yuer, are you okay?" Hashi didn't have time to reply before she felt something tighten around her hand, and by the time she realized what was happening, she had already been tugged behind Nangongyu. With a gloomy look on his face, he fixedly glared at Gu Lufeng, a dangerous light flashing within his eyes. "Young Master Gu, what did you think would happen when she's by my side?" Gu Lufeng stared blankly. Following which, he revealed a meaningful smile and lazily said, "There's no need for your Highness Hell King to be so petty. You two were opposing each other before, so I was unaware that you and little Yuer were companions. An exchange of blows may lead to friendship, and since your Highness Hell King won't hurt little Yuer, let's shake hands and get along." His explanation didn't make Nangongyu's expression better, it instead caused it to become darker. "Shut up. Who allowed you to call her little Yuer? Who would want to shake hands with you? Go far away from Sheer." Gu Lufeng looked at him with ridicule on his face and spread out his hands as he laughingly said, "You can say Sheer, yet I can't say little Yuer? Little Yuer, you say something, am I right?" Nangongyu pulled out his flying sword with his complexion as black as storm clouds. "You're courting death." Gu Lufeng seemed to be shocked as he took 3 steps backwards, but the expression in his peach blossom-like eyes was still relaxed, as if he was having fun teasing. Okay, in the future I'll call him Shiyu, that's okay, right?" Yet after a brief pause, he rubbed his chin while his line of sight swept back and forth between Nangongyu and Hashi. After what seemed to be a moment of contemplation, he meaningfully said, "This attitude of Hell King towards little Yuer, Kuf, Shiyu, you can really make one's imagination run wild. It's just that, why was there a rumor on the streets about you and that Ice Lotus Fairy? Your Highness Hell King, to be so hot and cold like this and have an affair, it's not good at all." Nangongyu was stunned. "What rumor?" "Naturally it's a rumor surrounding your marriage." Gu Liufeng's charming peach blossom-like eyes widened. He was obviously still wearing a mask, but it gave people the perception of grace. "It's well known that Hell King Manor will be connected by marriage to one of Mi Luo continent's 4 large sects, Lu Li sect, and that Hell King and Lu Li sect's young clan head, Ice Lotus Fairy, had long found affinity with the other, and that you've been yearning for each other secretly all this time. As soon as Ice Lotus Fairy leaves her closed-door cultivation, breaking through to nascent soul stage, the two of you will finally forge an alliance. Your Highness Hell King, this news is known by everyone in Yanjing City. Don't tell me that you don't know about this. Chapter 281. The space cracks. Nangong Yu's eyes instinctively looked towards Hashi, while Hashi snorted coldly and turned her head away to avoid looking at him. His face became extremely cold. Without bothering to answer Gu Lufeng, he instead chose to look at Qing Long with eyes containing a bitingly cold, murderous intent. Qing Long hurriedly took a step forward and cautiously said, "Answering Master, these rumors were spread by Intoxicated Happiness Square a while ago. We had originally wanted to deal with these rumors, but Zhu Ke did some investigating and found that Intoxicated Happiness Square was Lu Lisek's property. She also said, Master, that the friendship between you and Ice Lotus Fairy isn't ordinary, so if we handled it rashly, it would affect your relationship with Lu Lisek. Therefore, it has been delayed up until now." It would have been better if Qing Long hadn't spoken those words, but once he did, Gu Lufeng couldn't help but leisurely laugh as he strolled to Heshi's side and said, "Little Yuer, did you hear that? So they've actually had an unusual friendship since a long time ago." Heshi coldly glared at Gu Lufeng, causing him to rub his nose and reluctantly say, "All right, Shiyu." Nangong Yu's gloomy and cold gaze glared at Qing Long, making Qing Long, who was being stared at so bluntly, feel cold all over. He had the feeling that he would be kicked by his master at any moment. Shrinking his neck into his shoulders, he looked up and whispered, "Master," Nangong Yu coldly said, "Once we return, I want to see Intoxicated Happiness Square destroyed. If you can't even properly handle this kind of matter, all four of you better get out of Hell King Manor." "Yes, Master." Qing Long breathed out a long sigh of relief and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead before he then took a step backwards. Hashi was now bored of hearing about Ice Lotus Fairy, so she turned and looked at Gu Lufeng. "How did you find this place?" It must be known that Nangong Yu and Hashi hadn't disappeared normally, rather, they were drawn into the space crack. If the others had wanted to follow their trail to come here, it was simply impossible. Gu Lufeng said, "This one would like to thank that black-clothed bodyguard belonging to His Highness Hell King. After both of you disappeared, Feng Lianing, that malicious woman, and Senior Nye joined together to try and kill me. Fortunately, that brother came to the rescue." Hashi glanced at him before lightly snorting. "Would you have really been wiped out by Feng Lianing and Ye Jinshan? They had no hope of getting rid of you, you who pretends to be a pig being eaten by a tiger." She had in no way been inattentive when Gu Lufeng had been fighting with Feng Lianing. If it hadn't been due to Nangong Yu bin on nascent soul stage, even if Nye Jingshan had joined in, Gu Lufeng still would have won with ease. Cough cough. Gu Lufeng seemed to choke on his own saliva, and stroking his chin in disbelief, he said, "Little Yuer, you actually have so much confidence in me, this is really my honor." Nangong Yu was watching on the side, and seeing Gu Lufeng and Hashi talking so happily together, he felt like there was a fire nestled in his heart. He was itching to slaughter that frivolous kid who wore a mask. However, because of the rumors surrounding his supposed marriage from earlier, he didn't want to provoke Sheer into getting angrier. Due to this, Nangong Yu was feeling somewhat uneasy and he didn't dare act rashly. Speaking of this, he really was wronged. He obviously hadn't known anything about this rumor, and what's more, from childhood up till now he'd been never close to any woman. Now that he finally had someone he loved, he kept being misunderstood and ignored. It simply made an unspeakably frustrated and irritated mood boil within him. When Qing Long saw that his master was covered in a murderous aura that he was unable to vent, how could he not understand? So quickly stepping forward, he said, "Prin, cough, young Master Shi, this humble one and master have established a blood contract. So even if we're miles away from each other, I can still sense Master's location. Therefore, I was able to bring young Master Gu with me to find this place. This space crack has a high possibility of tearing apart, so all the way here this subordinate was worried, but fortunately, you and Master are all right." Chapter 282. Gluttonous Wu. When Hishi recalled the warm power that had wrapped around her when she was in the space crack, her expression couldn't help but become slightly gentle. However, Gu Lufeng standing nearby continued to add oil to the fire by saying, "Little Yuer, in the future you must be careful of Feng Lianing, that poisonous woman." These. You didn't get to see the sinister expression on her face after you and Hell King had disappeared. Even I myself had goosebumps when I saw it. I think she regards you as a powerful enemy who wants to snatch away her boyfriend. A woman who's jealous to the core will do whatever's necessary, no matter how unreasonable it is. Heshi was too lazy to correct Gu Lufeng of that nauseating address, and hearing what he had said, she sneered, "Even if she doesn't come to find me, it's unlikely that I'll ever let her off. At the end of the day, we'll see who moves faster and whose methods are more ruthless between the two of us." Gu Lufeng clapped his hands and laughed loudly. "Little Yuer, I like your take on revenge of hatred and forthright character. If I currently had wine, I would definitely have a drink with you, as I agree with you, my friend. Right? When you deal with that venomous woman, remember to call for me, as I have a great deal of hatred for her due to her injuring Yenin. So long as His Highness Hell King doesn't interfere, I believe that I still have the qualifications to help you out." After saying that, Gu Lufeng glanced towards Nangong Yu and saw a dark and gloomy face glaring back at him. Nangong Yu's expression was like he had just drunk vinegar and was on the verge of erupting. He obviously didn't care about the life or death of Ice Lotus Fairy, so Gu Lufeng couldn't help but smile. It seemed that the rumor really was unfounded. He hadn't expected that His Highness Hell King, who'd always been cold-hearted and never close to a female, to actually be fond of a man. Nevertheless, the beautiful youth was to some degree more beautiful than a celestial being in a painting. Just as Heshi was about to reply, she sensed movement, and in the next second, she saw a silhouette rapidly fly over them and land right before Nangong Yu. It was one of Nangong Yu's trusted aides, Wu. Wu Yu first saluted Nangong Yu, then reported the result of his explorations of the secret territory. After finishing, he turned his head and saw Heshi, causing him to immediately exclaim, "Prin Kuf, young Master Shi, why are you here?" Heshi nonchalantly responded with, "Why can't I be here?" "No, young Master Shi, of course you can be here." Wu Yu swiftly changed his stunned expression into a smile of fawning. "I was just so deeply emotional because that boy, couldn't find you outside. He even scoured all of Yanjing City, yet he still couldn't find you." Heshi raised her brows in puzzlement. "Why is Bai-Hu looking for me?" "Naturally, it's to protect you." Wu Yu gave her a look of, "Why are you asking a question when you already know the answer?" Master was aware that he would enter the secret territory, but this secret territory is extremely dangerous for martial artists of Meridian Stage and below, so naturally he couldn't bring you with him. Yet he was also worried that someone would trouble you when he wasn't present, and therefore he sent Bai-Hu to protect you outside. You don't know this, but I had originally wanted to handle the task of protecting you, while Bai-Hu had wanted to follow Master into the secret territory to take a look. But that grumpy brother of mine, Wu Exin, simply didn't listen to my protests, and he kicked me straight into the secret territory. You tell me, with ashes, mountains, and rocks everywhere, where there's nothing delicious to eat, what's the meaning of me even coming here? But I really didn't expect to see you, young Master Shi. Your cultivation base is so low, yet you were actually able to enter the secret territory. This is great. I no longer have to worry about what there is to eat. It's because Master missed you and hated to part with you, so at the last moment he dragged you along. Chapter 283, Shameless and Without Integrity, cough cough. Wu, you better shut up. A cold and deep voice abruptly sounded, interrupting Wu Yu's chatter. Wu Yu had always been slow to react, and turning his head, he noticed that Nangong Yu's face had darkened to the point where it could almost freeze water. Shuddering all over, he subconsciously moved closer towards Heshi and muttered, "Hee, that, just take it as if I'd never said anything. I don't know anything, I don't know." After that, he quickly turned to look at Heshi with a twinkle in his eyes, and if there had been a tail behind him, it probably would have been wagging. Young Master Shi, ever since I ate the spiritual food you made, I couldn't eat any other food for many days. Now that I've finally seen you again, it's really such a fortuitous event. So, do you have anything to eat?" Gu Liufeng's eyes were full of shock as he stared at Wu Yu in confusion. He seemed to have found out an incredible fact. This man before him, wasn't he the owner of Gluttonous House? He hadn't expected that one of Yanjing City's most famous buildings, Gluttonous House, would actually belong to Hell King Manor. In the end, how many secret forces did Hell King have? No, that's not the point. The point is that Wu Yu, who to everyone's eyes was the mysterious, powerful and cold-blooded owner of Gluttonous House, was privately so shameless and without integrity. An expert gold-core stage martial artist was actually begging for food from little Yuer, and what's more, he didn't look the slightest bit ashamed. Gu Lufeng felt like his 3 points of view had sustained a great impact. Qing Long's face twisted as he held his forehead. Could he say that he didn't know this idiot? With Wu Yu's conduct, he didn't believe that he could proudly stand side by side with him as one of Hell King's personal bodyguards. He refused to acknowledge Wu Yu as it was simply making him too ashamed. What Wu Exen had said was right. This gluttonous kid would one day be killed by his own mouth. Hashi looked at Wu Yu's sparkling eyes and watched as the corners of his mouth impossibly stretched wider and brighter. When she heard the sound of him swallowing his saliva, her mouth couldn't help but twitch. I believe I said last time that it wouldn't be repeated. I'm not a personal chef for Hell King Manor, so don't expect food from me every day. She liked to cook and had only intended for her food to be used as a way to reward herself, not for it to be wasted on other people. Dandan was her closest spiritual pet, so it wasn't a problem. And as for Nangong Yu, anyway, she didn't like the feeling that she had to serve other people. Hashi lifted her foot to leave, but Wu Yu rushed over and grabbed her skirt, giving her a, "If you don't give me a meal, I won't let you go" look. "Young Master Shi, as long as you give me some delicious food, I'll do anything you order me to do. I'll work extremely hard and won't hesitate at all. Whenever you, young Master Shi, send me on an errand, as long as it isn't harmful to Hell King Manor, I, Wu Yu, will brave any difficulty to achieve it." Blue veins twitched on Hishi's forehead. She wanted to get away from him and leave, but Wu Yu's unreasonable behavior and bawling had reached a completely shameless point. Oh well, although she was too lazy to cook, she still had some food that she had prepared earlier in her space. Forget about it, she would just give in and give some to him. She couldn't afford to throw away this shameless scoundrel without integrity just yet. Hashi withdrew a roast chicken from her space and threw it at him, and without waiting for her to say something, Wu Yu grabbed the roast chicken and started to devour it. The crispy golden roast chicken was fragrant with tender meat. Emitting strong spiritual power, it was accompanied by the smell of seasoning that wafted around everyone present, making them all unconsciously swallow their saliva. Gu Lufeng had originally scoffed at Wu Yu's shamelessness, but now he couldn't help but breathe in deeply and feel his stomach begin to rumble due to emptiness. Chapter 284, Greenwood Realm. I say, little Yuer, you can't favor one and discriminate against the rest. We're partners that just fought side by side. You gave this guy something to eat, so can't you give me something to eat too? We've not eaten for quite a while, so quickly give me some roast chicken too. This time it was Zhou Yan'an's turn to facepalm and shake his head. He never would have thought that his young master could also be so shameless. Hashi felt her head started to pound due to these noisy guys. Hence, she took out several roast chickens that she had prepared long ago from her space and threw one to each person. Finally, the surroundings quieted down, leaving only the muffled noise of chicken being chewed. When it was Nangong Yu's turn catch a roast chicken, he moved closer to Hashi and looked at her with resentment on his face. I want an assorted cake, shark fin soup cooked over purple sand, dragon and phoenix golden nest. Obviously, before it had only been him who was able to eat the dishes made by Sheer, yet now this group of brats had managed to taste it. Nangong Yu was unwilling to accept it. Extremely unwilling. Seeing them all eating with looks of enjoyment, he was really itching to squish their stupid faces into a mud pit. A corner of Hashi's mouth twitched as she retrieved her hand that was about to give him the roast chicken. It's up to you whether you want to eat it or not, I don't care. This guy actually dared to order food. Did he think of her as a cook? Nangong Yu quickly grabbed the roast chicken from her hand and taking advantage of the situation, her embraced her waist and whispered in her ear, I said before that you're not allowed to make food for others to eat as Sheer's taste only belongs to me, Hashi responded by kicking him away with distaste. After lunch, They took a moment to take a break and reorganize before preparing to continue on their journey. According to the map on the jade slip that Nangong Yu had previously obtained, they were currently located in the Greenwood realm, in the inner layer of the sealed dragon domain. There were no treasures that people would fight over in the Greenwood realm, only many fierce demonic beasts that were roaming around. Therefore, not many martial artists would specifically go out of their way to come here. However, according to Wu Yu's exploration, there was a medicinal field located in the Greenwood realm where Zijin's master had grown his lifetime collection of spiritual herbs. Originally, the medicinal field had a strong rate of herb survival, and after 1,000 years of growth, the plants inside must be very precious. Nangong Yu knew that Heshi's medical skill was superb and that she was very interested in collecting uncommon spiritual plants. Since Gu Lufeng and the others didn't have anything they particularly wanted to do, they decided to proceed towards the medicinal field. In fact, the thing Heshi most wanted to find at this moment was the key to gain control over the secret territory. Unfortunately, she had had no idea that each layer of the secret territory was so dangerous, and anyway, if they wanted to leave the Greenwood realm, they needed to find the formation, one location which couldn't be done within a short amount of time. Hence, she could only give up. Moreover, there would certainly be many precious spiritual plants to be found in Zijin Master's medicinal field, and she wanted to take the opportunity to see if she could find the divine dragon fruit that the little dragon needed. If she could, then that would be great. Suddenly, she recalled something that the little dragon had said about the Burning Heaven realm. Greenwood realm, Burning Heaven realm. Did this mean that the Burning Heaven realm might also be part of the sealed dragon domain? The more she thought about it, the more likely she figured that she was correct. She was now starting to become a little impatient about gaining control of the secret territory. Greenwood realm wasn't large, so in merely half a day they had managed to spot the location of the medicinal field and found that it was enveloped by a white fog. The reason there was a fog was that this area could be considered the most sought-after location in the entire Greenwood realm. The white fog should be covering Zijin Master's medicinal field where he had planted the spiritual plants, but examining it from the outside, the scene inside was indistinct and they were completely unable to see anything clearly. There were at least a dozen martial artists surrounding the white fog. Most of them were only Meridian stage, but there were also a few Gold Core stage martial artists. All of them were gazing towards the fog with a grave expression, an excited and anxious aura surrounding them. When Heshi and her group approached, they all turned around and glared at them, many of their faces morphing into a grave and dreadful expression. 1. Formation. Divided into battle formations and spell formations, although they are often just called formations. Battle formations are tactical formations used by several cultivators or martial artists attacking in concert. Spell formations are also called arrays. They're essentially magic circles which cast a continuous area of effect spell on the location the formation encompasses. Chapter 285. The Murong family. Many people wouldn't recognize His Highness Hell King, but still, Wu Yu had quickly made him a disguise so that no one would know his true identity just in case. But even though Hell King was disguised, an imposing aura was still being released from Hishi's group, particularly from Qing Long and Wu Yu. The two of them hadn't bothered to conceal their cultivation base at all, and with them both being at the peak of Gold Core stage, it caused the groups surrounding the fog to shrink back in alarm. A martial artist in the early ranks of Gold Core stage came forward and warily sized them up. "You also want to enter the medicinal field?" Wu Yu indifferently responded, "If so, then what? I'll give you a bit of advice. You had better leave this place immediately." The martial artist then lifted his head and arrogantly said, "Let me tell you the truth. This medicinal field has been claimed by our Murong family. You can enter if you want, but you'll have to pay 80% of whatever you earn from the medicinal field to us." Before Wu Yu could reply, he saw Gu Lufeng, who had been silently listening to this the whole time, suddenly take a step forward and sneer as he said, "If we don't agree? Don't agree." The martial artist burst into loud laughter. "Do you think that just because your cultivation base is high that you can take whatever you want from this medicinal field? I'll tell you now that in here, even if your cultivation base high, you still can't overturn the wind and the waves. Even if you're a dragon on the outside, Once you're in our Murong family's territory, you have to be obedient. Murong family? Gu Lufeng slowly stressed the word. The head of the Murong family belongs to one of Yanjing City's 4 great clans. Don't tell me you don't know this? Arrogance flitted across the gold core stage martial artist's face, and he looked at Gu Lufeng in contempt. If you don't abide by Greenwood Realm's rules, even if you leave, my Murong family will never let you go. So if you're tactful, you should either get lost, or you'll obediently do what we tell you to do. That martial artist hadn't yet finished speaking when a fierce red light shot from Gu Liufeng's hand. Uttering a shrill scream as he flew back several feet, the martial artist then smashed heavily to the ground. His eyes opened wide as they filled with disbelief. On his chest, there was a still ablaze wound that spread him open from chest to abdomen. You? Blood continuously flowed from his mouth and his face was a terrifying sight, filled with obstinacy. Ultimately, he was unable to finish what he was saying before he stopped breathing. All the martial artists who were watching this had the same frightened expression on their faces due to Gu Liufeng's ruthlessness, whether they were Murong family subordinates or a few of the Nayland family subordinates. While on the contrary, the group of people from Heshi's side were completely unmoved regarding Gu Liufeng's abrupt violence. To them, it was as if what he had killed was nothing more but an insignificant ant. Instead, the rather gossipy Wu Yu leaned towards Gu Lufeng and whispered, "Oh, do you hate the Murong family?" Gu Lufeng calmly retrieved his long sword, an indolent smile hanging on a corner of his mouth. "They're nothing but a group of dressed-up pigs that are unpleasant to the eyes. It's best to slaughter them when you see them. What hatred are you talking about?" Hearing that, Wu Yu let out a fit of laughter and didn't bother trying to pry further into Gu Liufeng's privacy. Rather, he pointed at a martial artist beside the white fog and demanded, "You, come here." That person was a middle-rank Meridian stage martial artist. After just witnessing Gu Liufeng's ruthlessness, his face instantly turned white when he was called over and he wished he could dig a hole to hide himself in. Don't call me. I'm not from the Murong family. I was staying here in the hopes that I could take advantage of any trouble that might occur." Wu Yu sneered, "Just come here when I tell you to. Talk any more nonsense and I'll rip your tongue out of your mouth to be a snack that'll accompany a glass of wine." The Meridian stage martial artist was scared witless and began shaking all over. Frantically rushing forwards, he dropped to his knees before Wu Yu's feet, trembling as he kowtowed to beg for mercy. Chapter 286, The White Fog's Absorption of Spiritual Power. Wu Yu crossed his arms in front of his chest as he asked, "Tell me, what's with this strange white fog? Why did that useless trash from the Murong family say that even if someone's cultivation base is high, they still couldn't overturn the wind and the waves? How could a low-level martial artist ever dare to conceal the truth?" Hurriedly, he replied, "Senior, please spare me my little life. I'll tell you everything that I know. I don't know what formations are inside the fog, but no matter how high a person's cultivation base is, when they enter that white fog, their spiritual power will quickly start to drain away. Moreover, any methods you might have to control your spiritual power will become ineffective once inside. Even if it were a martial artist of nascent soul stage, they would also become an ordinary person without any cultivation base. A person's spiritual power will quickly drain away?" Wu Yu stroked his chin while frowning, then he said, "Do you know what happens to the ones who go inside?" The martial artist's face now looked somewhat frightened as he shook his head. "We went in for a while and found that the road ahead was endless and obscured. When we realized that the spiritual power within our bodies was draining at high speed, we escaped out of fear. This humble one had 2 companions with him who didn't believe in evil. They went in, but the Jade Life tablets they left with this humble one shattered. If a Jade Life tablet were to shatter, then that would mean that the martial artist who owned it had died." Wiping away the perspiration on his forehead, the martial artist continued in a trembling voice, "Once this humble one left the white fog, this humble one discovered that after a full 2 hours my spiritual power restored itself. Unfortunately, during that period this humble one's strength was lacking more 50% of its usual power. Due to that, This humble one nearly lost his life to all the martial artists who had surrounded the white fog hoping to collect any small advantage. If it were not for this humble one handing over several treasures, this humble one would have long been on the journey to the underworld. Wu Yu frowned as he turned to look at Nangong Yu and Heshi. The white fog could absorb all of a martial artist's spiritual power? This issue was indeed troublesome. Since the medicinal field was inside the white fog, it was unknown whether any of the martial artists who had previously entered had met with an ambush or, if after they had left the medicinal field, with their spiritual powers wholly depleted, they just couldn't resist an attack. It would have been like slaughtering fish in a barrel. Wu Yu glanced at a few of the gold core stage martial artists standing nearby. Other than glaring towards Heshi's group, none of them blindly attacked. Satisfied with how they were now acting, he said, "So now you stay here in the hopes that when someone comes out from inside, you can take advantage of their powerlessness to loot them? Didn't the Murong family take control of this area? They still allow you all to take advantage here?" Trembling, the low-rank martial artist broke out into a cold sweat before hanging his head and saying, "What the Murong family want is some of the rare spiritual plants inside the medicinal field. In particular, they seem to be looking for a 7th-grade spiritual herb known as the mythical heart herb. The Murong family will thoroughly search every person that exits the white fog, and then those that remain and are deemed unnecessary by them are then left for us to search and divide between us." Wu Yu had nothing more to ask, so he waved his hand and allowed the martial artist to return to where he'd previously been standing. Then, turning towards Nangong Yu, he said, "Master, the risk of entering the white fog is too big. It's better to let me and Qin Long go to the medicinal field while you and young Master Shi wait outside." "Out of the question." Heshi immediately vetoed. "You wouldn't be able to recognize any of the medicinal herbs, and you also don't know to pick them safely. I want to go to the medicinal field by myself. You can wait outside." What a joke. Her space was the best place to transplant the medicinal herbs. If there were any precious spiritual plants in the medicinal field, she would of course straight away move them into her space to ensure their survival. If she didn't go in herself, the damage to the herbs would be too significant. Upon hearing that, Nangong Yu's face instantly darkened. You should just drop the matter. I said before that I'd never let you leave me. Not to mention, letting you go to such a dangerous place alone is impossible." Chapter 287, Tied Together Forever. Qin Long and Wu Yu were alarmed, quickly moving to prevent Nangong Yu from risking himself. "Master, your identity is rather extraordinary. If you were to lose your cultivation base and people knew it, then the consequences would be unthinkable. If you're worried about young Master Shi's safety, then Wu Yu and I can accompany him. We swear we won't let young Master Shi suffer any injuries." A corner of Gu Liufeng's mouth perked up, while a charming smile flowed within his eyes. "It's also okay if you don't go. I'll accompany little Yue. With me partnered with little Yue, what difficulties won't we sweep away? What do you think about it, little Yue? Am I right?" With a languid appearance, he leaned over to put his arm over Heshi's shoulder. Qin Long and Wu Yu's eyes widened. This good-for-nothing, even at a time like this, he still dared to provoke Nangong Yu. Sure enough, a glint of coldness appeared in Nangong Yu's eyes, and an invisible beam of spiritual energy shot forth. With a swish, it instantly pulled Heshi to his side. Following that, Gu Lufeng cried out in shock from the sudden action. Jumping away, electricity had now scorched the long hair that had previously hung in front of his face into a bundle of smoking ends. This resulted in him cutting a sorry figure. Nangong Yu glared at him coldly, slowly stressing, "It'll never be necessary for you to protect my people. I will never allow Sheer to leave me. Even more, he would never allow Sheer to be alone with this bastard." "Master!" Qin Long and Wu Yu were full of anxiety, but they just couldn't persuade Nangong Yu to stay. Having no other alternative, they threw pleading looks towards Heshi. Heshi held her forehead. She would like nothing more than to get rid of these annoying people and just go in herself, but seeing Nangong Yu's persistent gaze and Gu Liufeng's smiling eyes, forget it, she had better things to do and didn't want to waste any effort. Heshi's gaze fell on the white fog. With a hint of doubt flashing within her eyes, She couldn't hold back and reached out her hand to touch it. There didn't seem to be any unusual feeling or spiritual power absorption. It appeared that she needed to be inside to experience it personally. In the end, how did this white fog absorb a person's spiritual power? "Don't be so noisy," Heshi muttered. "I'm curious about this white fog that absorbs spiritual power. I'll go in first to take a look, while you all stay to discuss who will go and who will stay." Nangong Yu instantly responded, "I'll go with you. I'm just going in to take a look, not heading towards the medicinal field. I don't need anyone to accompany me." Heshi looked up and saw Nangong Yu's persistently stubbornly expression, so she helplessly said, "Or you can take your golden silk and tie it around me, will that do?" Heshi had said this as a joke, but who would have thought that when Nangong Yu heard it, his eyes lit up and he immediately took out the golden silk. A moment later, Heshi watched as the golden silk was tied between her right hand and Nangong Yu's left hand, causing a corner of her mouth to twitch. Nangong Yu then leaned closer to her ear and whispered, "Sheer, I really want to tie you like this to me forever." Heshi turned around and stormed into the white fog without the slightest hesitation. She refused to look at this shameless guy. After barely entering, Heshi felt an immense force suctioning out her spiritual power within the white fog. Her complexion turned pale, while from a distance she could just hear someone's shrieks. "Let me out! Let me leave this damned fog! I no longer want any treasure, just let me leave." The white fog was not only able to absorb a person's spiritual power, but it was also able to make fear bloom within a person's heart and confuse their mind, resulting in them becoming lost within the white fog. Along with this, after their spiritual power was utterly drained, the martial artist would then find that their vitality would start to drain away. So for most people who went into the white fog, they would find themselves unable to come out, but still unable to reach the medicinal field. Unfortunately, this would end with them losing their lives within the white fog. Chapter 288, Barely Satisfactory. After a moment of silence, Heshi's expression regained its tranquility. For her, although her cultivation base was significant, it wasn't her only way to save a person's life. She still had poison, qinggong, and her internal power. If there was anyone who dared to rush over and provoke her, she wasn't afraid to fix that person's appearance. As Heshi's heart calmed down, she began to sense the spiritual power in her body gradually draining away, as if an external force was pulling and pushing her dantian to make it release her spiritual power. However, the spiritual power that was released didn't form any fluctuations in the surroundings as the white fog immediately absorbed it. Heshi tried burning the white fog but found that the spiritual fire was barely released from her body before it disappeared without a trace. As time went on, more and more spiritual power drained from her body, and once it reached almost 80%, her complexion was nearly deathly white. But suddenly she opened her eyes, and within them, a trace of understanding was visible while a confident smile graced her lips. Outside the white fog, Nangong Yu's hand tightly gripped the golden silk. His outward expression was calm, but his clenched fist exposed his nervousness. Abruptly, his eyes lit up and gazing towards the white fog, he saw a slender silhouette slowly moving closer. With facial features as bright as sunlight within the white fog, her appearance resembled the most enchanting fairies of the demon beast forest. This image firmly lodged itself in his heart, and he found that he was no longer able to free himself. As soon as Heshi exited the white fog, she immediately swallowed a spiritual supplement pill that was made with spirit spring water and began to meditate to regulate her spiritual power. She had already discovered a way to deal with the white fog, but first, she needed to restore her spiritual power and then she would go in to try again. The spiritual supplement pill had barely entered Heshi's body before she suddenly felt tranquil spiritual power suffuse her body from her back. Slowly entering her body, that spiritual power carried with it a familiar warmth and gentleness. It was Nangong Yu. He was using his spiritual power to assist her body in absorbing the spiritual supplement pill and accelerate its effects. Heshi closed her eyes and obediently accepted Nangong Yu's spiritual power. Gradually, her dried-up dantian filled, and a corner of her mouth stretched into a faint smile. Half an hour later, Heshi stood up and said, "I want to enter the white fog again." With that, not waiting for everyone's reaction, she took out a few silver needles and inserted them into several of her acupuncture points. Then, she turned and entered the white fog without hesitation. This time, He only stayed in for a quarter of an hour. However, after she came out, her complexion was rosy, and her smile even reached her eyes. Unlike before, she didn't appear weak and pale due to the loss of spiritual power. Wu Yu and the others were confused at first, but once they realized what had happened, they stared at her with wide eyes. Young Master Shi, you found a way to suppress the loss of spiritual power? He nodded and took her pulse. Then, with regret evident in her voice, she said, I've found a way to suppress the loss of spiritual power, but that can only prevent the loss to about 80%. Moreover, this kind of method is normally only used to strengthen a person. In an environment such as the white fog, attacking is absolutely impossible. In the end, figuring out a way within such a short time left me with barely satisfactory results. This is still barely satisfactory? You're not satisfied. How do you let other people live if these are your standards? Wu Yu glanced at Qinglong, his face full of shock and admiration. This princess of his was too awesome. None of the Gold Core stage or nascent Soul stage martial artists had been able to do anything about the white fog, but their princess's hands had effortlessly brushed it aside. She really was a woman worthy of his abnormal master's fancy. He lifted her head to look at everyone. To be sure, it's best if someone amongst you all goes in and tries it out. She wanted to test it out just in case there was someone with a slightly unusual constitution. If she were unable to seal their acupuncture points, then that would be troublesome. Chapter 289. I'll go wherever you go. Qinglong quickly stepped forward. Young Master Shi, let this subordinate try it. He nodded her head and stuck several needles into his body without hesitation. The amount of time that Qinglong stayed in was rather long, so it was about half an hour before he rejoined them. The moment that he came out of the white fog, the ordinarily calm Qinglong now had a face full of smiles as he walked up to He and said respectfully, Young Master Shi, your medical knowledge has really reached perfection. To be able to suppress the loss of spiritual power by sealing acupuncture points, one would first have to have a deep understanding and confidence in the human body and meridian structures. It was also at this moment that Qinglong was utterly convinced. If they were to ever find a cure to Nangong Yu's cold illness in Miluo continent, it would be in their princess's hands. Hexi's brows furrowed. Although this method can solve a part of the problem, I feel that the dangers in the medicinal field will be far more than this. Furthermore, I don't know how much land the white fog covers. If we were to stay in it for a few hours and were unable to come out, then it's very likely that sealing off our acupuncture points wouldn't be able to prevent the draining of spiritual power. You better clearly think about whether or not you want to take the risk of going in with me. These people were locally born and bred cultivators who were public figures. For them to be without spiritual power would be equal to them having their hands and feet broken, which would be far too dangerous. As for herself, spiritual power had never been the only way to protect herself. In a crisis, she just didn't care about how much spiritual power she lost. However, before He could finish speaking, Nangong Yu lightly tapped her nose and unhappily said, Little girl without conscience, I've said it so many times before, but you still want to leave me behind. I said previously that I'd go wherever you go, so don't ever think of abandoning me. Since Nangong Yu wanted to go in, of course, Wu Yu and Qinglong would follow him. After all, compared to these useless people who were attempting to rob treasures on the outside, there were likely to be more dangers in the medicinal field. While Gu Lufeng, on the other hand, gave a smug look. I said before that I wanted to go on an adventure together with little Yuer, he laughingly said, completely ignoring the sharp glare that Nangong Yu was throwing him. In the end, only Zhou Yenin and several of the bodyguards from Hell King Manor remained outside the white fog. Their cultivation bases weren't high, so Qinglong made them hide far away to wait for more orders once they left the white fog. When He saw how many people were determined to enter the medicinal field with her, she no longer tried to persuade them and instead fished out a bottle of medicinal pills and handed them to everyone. This is a kind of medicinal pill that can increase a martial artist's strength and speed in a short period. The medicine is relatively mild, and the effect isn't too excessive. If an ordinary martial artist were to take this, they could withstand a level 3 or 4 Qi refining stage martial artist at most, but the advantage is the duration time. Moreover, it has no side effects on the body. These medicines had initially been prepared to help Shi Jia and the others while they were training. When He had refined them, she'd kept a few bottles in her space, but she'd never expected there would be a time when they would come in handy. The people surrounding He each held a pill with an amazed expression, not doubting her words in the slightest. During this time, He had utterly subdued them all with her incredible medical skills. Even Gu Lufeng swallowed the pill without hesitation. When the effect of the medicinal pill was felt within his body, shock covered his face. As he gazed at He, his eyes gleamed with a brilliant light. Outside the white fog, several martial artists were watching as they hid in the distance. When they saw that Nangong Yu and the others were entering and exiting the white fog several times, before finally entering the white fog and disappearing from their sight, they couldn't help but exclaim in shock. They're really entering the white fog? Aren't they afraid that they'll be unable to come out and will be completely lost in there? Chapter 290, A Hell-like World. When they were going in and out of the white fog before, could it be that it was to find a secret method? How could there be a secret method? When they entered the white fog, they didn't have any spiritual power fluctuation. This was a clear sign that their spiritual power is being absorbed by the white fog. Humph, this group of idiots. It must be because their cultivation bases are so profound that they're able to get through the white fog. In that case, we just have to wait here to profit from them. But those people's cultivation bases were so high and their methods were so vicious. What if by chance their cultivation bases are high so that without their cultivation bases they only end up like ordinary people? At that time, the more treasures they have, the greater the benefits we can get. Humph, daring to oppose my Murong family. I'll let that stinky brat who wore a mask know what happens to those who offend my Murong family. Inside the white fog, there was a bone-chilling aura. Without spiritual power, a cultivation base, and having your physical strength drained away little by little, this was a hell-like world. However, this was more terrible compared to gradually moving towards a possible death as hidden within the dense fog. The sounds of a massacre could suddenly be heard all around. Ah! Spare me! I beg you, spare me! I'll give you all of my treasures! Wretched screams and begging echoed throughout the thick fog. However, the only response that was given was the rough and excited laughter of men. Sparing your life just gets us treasure, but if we kill you, then the treasures and your woman are all ours. You tell us if it was you, what would you choose? The figures of 7 to 8 sturdy and tall men with their faces covered with a black cloth surrounded a small group of people. The lead man's eyes were slanted at an angle as he looked at the young girl with lewd and greedy intentions. We're disciples of the Red Cloud sect of the Tiangang Kingdom. If you dare lay your hands on us, my sect master will never let you off. However, that masked man laughed and said, The Red Cloud sect won't let us off? That depends on whether or not you can escape from here. As long as you silently die here and your bodies rot away leaving only bones, no one will ever discover your presence. Being surrounded, the 5 martial artists' faces showed horrified and desperate expressions. Within this white fog, their spiritual power had utterly disappeared, and their weak bodies were even more susceptible to attacks than an ordinary person's. These vulgar men before them had cultivation bases that were merely in the early ranks of Meridian stage. Outside the white fog, they wouldn't even be good enough to carry the shoes of a Red Cloud sect's disciple. But now they had the nerve to try and kill them. The masked leader burst into loud laughter and waved his hand as he said, Brothers, except for that beautiful young lady, smash the rest of their heads in for me using giant hammers. As his words fell, several men rushed forward shouting strangely, the noise similar to the sound a swarm of hornets make leaving their nest. Every one of them held a gigantic weapon in their hand. Some were holding giant hammers, some were holding large swords, and there was even one who held a huge and heavy axe. These heavy weapons were simply unable to be held up by ordinary people. However, in the men's hands they were like swaying toys. In just a short moment, four young martial artists had their bodies effortlessly smashed, a blood-curdling screech piercing the silence as they fell to the ground. The terrifying part, though, was that one person was split open from head to toe by the large axe, causing his internal organs and blood to spew to the ground. This scene was extremely bloody and terrifying. The young girl was the only one who remained, and she released a horrified shriek, her voice full of fear and despair. The masked leader was covered in sweat as he stepped forward and pulled at the girl, forcing her to stand up. Then he maniacally laughed as he said, "Brothers, do you see her? Such a soft and tender-skinned young girl with a cultivation base at the peak of Meridian stage. I'm sure in her large sect she's the cream of the crop. Have you ever tasted such a delicacy before?" Chapter 291. This Group of Animals. Everyone roared with laughter and jeered in unison. "After eldest brother finishes having fun with her, it'll be our turn." The girl struggled with all her might to escape from the man's large hands, simultaneously letting out a heart-rending screech. "You're all animals. Animals. If you dare touch me, my master and daddy will never let you go. Kill me if you have the ability." The masked man yelled as he groped her chest, laughing with a lecherous expression. "Kill you? Such a beautiful girl. How could we be willing to kill you?" The force of his grip increased, and a tearing sound could be heard as the girl's clothes were instantly torn to shreds, revealing her soft skin and red undergarments. Indeed, this is an item of the highest quality. Saliva pooled in the men's mouths and their eyes gleamed with fiery lust. "Eldest brother, what are you waiting for? Quickly fuck this girl." With the fog being so thick and heavy, it's a natural barrier from prying eyes. The masked leader's eyes were also shining as he turned to his brother behind him and said, "Shoho, hold this girl's feet for me, don't let her move." After his words, he immediately pinned the girl to the ground as if she was an animal. The girl's miserable and desperate shrieks echoed incessantly throughout the thick fog. However, her resounding scream was unanswered. Furthermore, even if someone did hear it, what could they do? Everyone in this thick fog was rendered powerless, so who could come and save her? In the blink of an eye, the masked man had completely stripped off the girl's clothes. Shoho couldn't help but loudly swallow his saliva as he held the girl down, an impatient expression on his face. All of a sudden, Shoho felt something cold touch his neck that caused a sharp twinge. He couldn't help but reach out his hand to touch his neck, yet unexpectedly, his line of sight abruptly changed and flipped completely upside down. Shoho opened his eyes wide with shock and stared helplessly at his now headless body. He then watched as it incessantly spewed forth a tremendous amount of blood that splashed across the girl's body, as well as the boss's. "Arg!" Amongst the robust men standing around in a circle and watching, the cowardly ones uttered screams of terror. The masked leader, who was soaked in blood, finally returned to his senses and suddenly jumped up, gripping his large axe as he shouted, "Who are you that you dared to launch a sneak attack on us? Quickly reveal yourself." As his words fell, he saw a vague silhouette slowly moving within the white fog. It was a youngster who looked to be about 16 to 17 years old. He had snow-white skin, striking features, and bright red lips that were slightly pursed, like a red plum flower that had softly fallen onto the snow in winter. As he gradually appeared, the dense fog swept across his face, slicking back the jet-black strands of his satin-like hair and causing it to gently stick to his slender and fair neck. Following the gorgeous arc of his neck, it gracefully extended downwards to an exquisite collarbone, prompting wild and fanciful thoughts. The masked leader gulped. He could clearly see that the person before his eyes was a man, yet he still couldn't help but feel his throat tighten, his breathing deepen, and the stirring in his genitals that had vanished due to the blood just a moment ago was now back and throbbing more vigorously than before. Oh shit! This was apparently a young man, however. To think that he was actually more seductive than the young lady from the Red Cloud sect. Stinky brat, you must have guts if you want to be a hero and rescue a beauty. Or do you want to replace that young lady and have fun with us brothers instead? The youngster ignored him and laughed, a corner of his mouth lifting into a stunning curve before he suddenly waved his right hand. A purple shadow flew like a lightning bolt towards the man who spoke. Before he could react, That purple shadow abruptly wrapped around his neck and dragged him forwards like a dead fish. Chapter 292. Helping others. When everyone could finally see what it was, they saw that the purple shadow was actually a vine. Moreover, it was emitting a frightening amount of spiritual pressure. Who did you want to have fun with? The youngster's voice echoed in their ears. It was a clear and melodious voice which was pleasant to listen to, but when it reached their ears, it was like hearing an evil spirit from the underworld. The man hanging from the vine opened his eyes wide and wanted to beg for mercy, but before he could utter a word, a crack resounded in his ears as his neck was instantly snapped and he lost his life. A corner of the youngster's mouth curled up into a cruel smile. As for the rest of you, who else wants to have fun with me? The very youngster before them now was Heshi. Not long after she'd entered the white fog, she was separated from Nangong Yu and the others. As for the reason of their separation, Heshi had noticed that the purple vine in her hand was restless. After entering the white fog, Heshi discovered that the white fog did more than merely injure a martial artist than just absorbing their spiritual power. Within the white fog, there was a hard-to-detect aura of ice-cold spiritual power. It entered a martial artist's meridians little by little, gradually slowing their movements. If they had a spiritual power supplement, it wouldn't really matter, but because spiritual power couldn't be used within the white fog, they could only purely rely on physical strength to resist the cold. Since everyone's physical strength decreased extremely fast, in just a short period their complexions had all become somewhat pale. Only Nangong Yu and Heshi didn't seem to be affected by the white fog. It was at this time that Heshi was surprised to discover that Nangong Yu had a dual soul cultivation base. Although he still couldn't use spiritual power, the cold air within the dense fog was nothing to him. While Heshi, on the other hand, wasn't affected because of the plant spirit pet that she'd just taken in. Though Heshi would never have guessed that the draining effect the white fog had towards spiritual power would be utterly ineffective towards the purple abyss vine. Not long after entering the white fog, the purple abyss vine had quietly left her space to explore, full of happiness and joy as it occasionally absorbed the spiritual power within the white fog. This caused Heshi to feel comfortably warm without a trace of coldness. However, what Heshi didn't expect was that after the purple abyss vine had absorbed an enormous amount of spiritual power from the white fog, it unexpectedly had a small advancement. This transformation affected the white fog and unfortunately caused a whirlpool to form inside the fog. But because the purple abyss vine was her spirit pet, she was directly involved and was drawn into the whirlpool too. As soon as she awoke, she found herself alone. When Heshi recalled being swept up into the whirlpool, she remembered Nangong Yu's frightened and sorrowful expression, as well as his trembling shouts. Her heart couldn't help but slightly tighten. That guy, he was really worried about her? Heshi returned from her train of thought about Nangong Yu and swept her icy gaze over the masked men, before ultimately settling them on the undressed girl. The clothes on the girl's body had long been torn to reveal her delicate skin, but sadly, it also showed the ghastly bruises and cuts that covered her. The girl's expression had been blank, as if she'd reached an extreme level of fear and desperation. It wasn't until her gaze had locked with Heshi's that she'd finally realized that she was saved, and it was then that she'd broken down into loud sobs. At that moment, she'd really thought that she was ruined. Even if she hadn't died today, her life would have still been the same as a dead person's. However, at such a critical moment, this godlike youngster had appeared like a hero with a bright cloud beneath his feet, rescuing her from hell. Heshi's eyes widened, and her cold gaze traveled back towards the few masked who were still panicking. Originally, I wasn't interested in meddling in other people's business, but who told you all to commit such a disgusting act? You're all worse than pigs. You're fortunate for running into me today, since this young master occasionally likes to help others. After all, what harm is there in helping others once in a while? Chapter 293, Blood Refining Body Cultivator. Damn bastard, who do you think you are? How dare you meddle in our business? At that moment, the masked leader finally returned to his senses. When he took a closer look at Heshi's frail figure, exquisite face, pure white skin, and body without any spiritual power fluctuations, he immediately sneered without the fear that he'd had a moment ago. You're only relying on a spiritual weapon that doesn't require spiritual power, yet you want to take advantage of us? Dream on. Haven't I told you yet? I'm a blood-refining body cultivator, not an ordinary spiritual cultivation martial artist. Even if you use a magical weapon, don't think that you can survive under my hands. Upon saying that, the bodies of the masked men suddenly exploded with a severe amount of pressure that rivaled Mount Tai, and their entire bodies began to be enveloped in orange light. Upon saying that, the bodies of the masked men suddenly exploded with a severe amount of pressure that rivaled Mount Tai, and their entire bodies began to be enveloped in orange light. In this world, most martial artists chose the road of spiritual cultivation. However, there were also a few who had poor qualifications and eventually decided to refine their bodies instead. Refining the body was 100 times more painful than spiritual cultivation, and the majority didn't survive the training. In the end, they could only die like an ordinary person. Therefore, exceptions such as Nangong Yus were abnormal. Being able to achieve a dual soul cultivation base was near impossible. The ranks of refining the body were divided into a total of honing the tendons, refining the blood, cleansing bone marrow, tempering the bones, casting off a mortal body and being reborn, and becoming an immortal. Don't think that a blood-refining body cultivator was weak because if they wanted to advance, they didn't have to train hard for decades. Once they broke through the first rank, a blood-refining body cultivator would be on an equal level regarding the strength of a high-rank foundation establishment stage martial artist. The moment Heshi noticed their bodies emitting an orange light, she was momentarily curious yet amazed. Of course, she wasn't afraid of their strength. Instead, she was thinking about the differences between the methods of training for refining the body and the methods of training she gave to Shijia and the others. Although Shijia and the others were now rapidly improving, there was still no better way for them to advance. If she could combine her training methods with the blood-refining body cultivation method, wouldn't it help them to reach a new whole level? Seeing the surprise on Heshi's face, the masked leader couldn't help but be supremely proud of himself. So lifting up his large axe, he rushed forth as he shouted, "I'll let you have a taste of my big axe." With a loud boom, the white fog surged forth and completely enveloped the two people fighting, blocking them from view. However, while the remaining few strong men had full confidence in their boss, they couldn't help but loudly tease, "Boss, remember to keep that little rabbit alive. We don't mind playing with him, even if he is a little boy. Boss, even if you chop off his hands and feet, spare that beautiful face of his. Adding it to our loot collection would be good too." Ha! The men's cruel and rough laughter made the girl on the ground curl up into a ball and tremble violently, tears of desperation streaming down her cheeks. If that youngster died, her fate would be incredibly miserable. What's more, that youngster, to save her would. Suddenly, the girl blankly stared ahead with wide eyes. She'd noticed that the initially thick fog was now slowly dispersing, allowing a rhythmic thumping to be heard before that too ultimately stopped when the fog cleared. The next moment, she saw a youngster dressed in pure white robes unhurriedly walking towards them. Twisted around his right hand, there was a purple-colored vine, while in his left hand, he was carrying a human head. Although the human head was dripping blood, the youngster's clothes weren't stained at all, as if he was a spotless white fairy untainted by the dirt of the world. At the same time, he seemed like an aloof god that looked down on everyone. Chapter 294, The Eye of the Array? The Core of the Array? The girl suddenly covered her mouth and uttered a muffled sound of joy, while tears continuously rolled down her cheeks like a strand of pearls with its strings snapped. While the group of strong men who had previously been excited and were jeering non-stop, simultaneously showed horrified expressions. Staggering back several steps, they were unwilling to believe that their powerful boss had been slaughtered. However, once they squinted to scrutinize the head, they recognized the familiar face. His facial features were twisted grotesquely, his eyes were wide open, and the black cloth covering his face had disappeared, revealing an expression of utter horror and despair. Spare our lives." Some of the men dropped to their knees, kowtowing to beg for mercy. while others screamed and tensed to flee into the thick fog. The purple vine in Hishi's hand flashed as it suddenly sprang forward. In the next second, it was like a sword as it pierced the backs of those who wanted to run away. Blood trickled down the leaves of the vine to drip unseen to the ground layered with white fog, and in a heartbeat, the air was permeated with the thick stench of blood. Although, when Hishi retrieved the vine, the purple leaves were already clean and fresh, you couldn't even see a trace of the blood. The purple abyss vine swayed in delight, expressing its happiness and desire to continue consuming blood. Hishi immediately rejected the purple abyss vine's wish to kill and eat in the white fog, and put the unwilling vine back into her space. She then slowly walked towards the only strong man who remained alive. The strong man currently had a blank look in his eyes as he trembled and stared at the corpses of his companions. Due to the trembling, his teeth were chattering together, and in the next moment, there was an overwhelming stench of urine as a wet patch spread between his legs. "Please have mercy, young master, spare my life. I beg of you, please spare my life, I won't dare do anything. I wouldn't dare." Hishi's towering figure looked down at him as she coldly asked, "Tell me, how long have you been in this white fog and how many martial artists have you robbed?" How could that man dare to conceal the truth? He quickly kowtowed and said, answering young master, "We were the first ones to enter this white fog. It's been 6 days. In the beginning, we didn't know that this white fog could completely absorb a martial artist's spiritual power. We just wanted to profit from the medicinal field. But later, when we discovered that those spiritual cultivation martial artists who usually think so highly of themselves would become useless and helpless in the white fog, we came up with the plan of robbing them." The man raised his head and looked at Hishi, only to find her eyes focusing on him. "Continue, say what you know." Yes. This small one absolutely wouldn't dare conceal anything. The man was so frightened that his trembling grew more violent before he quickly continued. "Normally us body-refining cultivators are bullied and humiliated by spiritual cultivators, yet now we had an opportunity to take revenge. Moreover, this white fog is very strange. After we explored deeper, we couldn't find the way out. Also, we couldn't find a way to enter the medicinal field. Therefore, we all figured that we might as well wait around here and focus on robbing the martial artists whose spiritual powers were drained." Hishi furrowed her brows. "There's no way to enter the medicinal field?" "We didn't find it, however, we met a group of extremely powerful martial artists. Although they didn't have any spiritual power, the imposing aura being emitted from their bodies was immense. We didn't dare approach them and instead, we quietly ran away. But I remember hearing them talking about wanting to enter the medicinal field and that to do so, they had to find the eye of the array, or the core of the array, or something. The eye of the array? The core of the array?" The wrinkle between Hishi's beautiful eyebrows deepened. As she'd expected, this white fog was a natural array. Chapter 295, Major Cloud Array. Since she'd read the ancient records left by Old Man Shumi, she had some understanding about arrays, but at most, it could only be regarded as minimal. So if she wanted to break the array, it was simply impossible. The strong man noticed that Hishi was lost in thought and completely unguarded. His hands that were by his sides slowly moved towards his chest pocket. He knew that this youngster before him would never let him go, so this being the case, he might as well strike first and try to gain an advantage. He abruptly took out a tube which stored poisonous needles and fiercely aimed one at the youngster's heart. With a quiet swoosh, a needle flickering with green light flew directly towards Hishi's chest. A vicious light gleamed within the man's eyes, and he couldn't help but shout as he stood up, "Bastard, go die!" Yet before he could finish his curse, his eyes opened wide in horror. What he saw was that the needle surrounded by flickering green light was unexpectedly caught between Hishi's slender and fair fingers. Then, before he could react, the needle suddenly flew back towards him, straight towards his left eye. "Ah!" The man uttered a pained scream as he covered his left eye and tumbled to the ground. He wanted to howl in anguish and beg for mercy, but before he could say a word, his eye that had been pierced by the needle began to rot while a white foam mixed with blood filled his mouth. There was so much that it started to overflow and he had to keep spitting it out. After a moment, he stopped breathing. Hashi was too lazy to even glance at him and turned to leave. The young girl who'd initially been curled up on her side with a frightened look on her face suddenly returned to her senses and shouted, young master, please stop." Hashi stopped and somewhat impatiently looked at her. The girl had a delicate and pretty face, a petite figure, a well-proportioned build, and she appeared to be about 17 to 18 years old. Unfortunately, she couldn't stop trembling as she tried to cover herself with the pile of rags that she clutched. She looked absolutely pitiful. The girl shivered under Hashi's cold gaze, but nonetheless, she held back the fear and shame bubbling within her heart to lower her head and quietly say, "Young master, many thanks for your kindness. Can you please tell me your name? I will certainly repay you in the future." "No need," Hashi indifferently replied. "I didn't mean to save you. They were just unpleasant to look at, nothing more." A trace of disappointment flashed within the girl's eyes, but it was quickly replaced with even more gratitude. "No matter how it happened, if you hadn't saved me, I really don't know. My name is Shun Qingxue, and I'm a disciple of the Red Cloud sect. Young master, if you have anything that requires my help in the future, please don't hesitate to find me at the Red Cloud sect. I'll certainly go to any length to repay young master's favor." The girl had initially wanted to use a jade tablet or talisman for help, but in this white fog, she couldn't open her storage ring. This made her heart feel upset and ashamed. Hashi nodded her head to indicate that she understood, then turned around to leave once more. Seeing his back as he turned around, Shin Qingchua bit her lower lip and suddenly said, "Young master, do you want to enter the medicinal field?" "I know the way to enter it." Hashi stopped in her tracks, her gaze not as cold as it was before as she looked back at the girl. Shen Qingchua's cheeks reddened, and she slightly lowered her eyelashes. Then, she softly said, I heard my sect elders say that Zijin Master's medicinal field is known as the 100 Herb Mist, and that the array inside is the powerful Major Cloud Array. There are a total of 2 sections to the array, the core and the 64-part eye. Only one of them is in this white fog though. If you want to break the Major Cloud Array, you need to find the array eye and cut off its energy supply. With that, the array core will shortly appear as a portal door. That portal door is the gateway to the medicinal field. Chapter 296, We will definitely meet again. I just have to find this core of the array? Shen Qingchua tilted her head to the side in thought for a moment, then said, "Actually, there is a way. That is, a way to destroy all 64 parts of the array eye in a short period, causing the array to briefly cease functioning. Although this period of time will only be for a few short breaths, if you're prepared to enter the medicinal field, then it's still possible. But, wanting to find the 64 parts of the array eye within a short time is practically impossible because once the time runs out, the destroyed parts of the array will be automatically restored. Moreover, the force the fog uses to absorb spiritual power will dramatically increase." Hashi looked pensive as she said, "I understand, thank you for telling me this." Having said that, Hashi withdrew a set of clothes from her space and gave them to Shin Qingchua, before she indifferently said, "This should be enough to repay you for your information. It's dangerous inside this white fog, so you should hurry up and leave." This time she didn't stop and quickly disappeared into the thick fog. Left alone, the girl quickly dressed in the clothes that had been handed to her. Lifting up one of the sleeves to the tip of her nose, she smelled the scent of fresh medicinal herbs and a faint blush covered both of her cheeks. "We'll meet again, right? We will definitely meet again." Hashi's figure disappeared into the fog, and to ensure that no one was around, she immediately summoned the purple abyss vine from her space. As the purple abyss vine came into contact with the white fog, it promptly began swaying excitedly. It then started transmitting its excitement and cravings to Hashi through her divine sense. However, Hashi didn't dare let it do as it pleased and refused to allow it to absorb more spiritual power. If it were to cause another whirlpool within the white fog or directly touch the array, then she would be in big trouble. After appeasing the purple abyss vine and promising to give it some spiritual fire for it to eat when they entered the medicinal field, the purple abyss vine reluctantly calmed down. Hashi flicked her hands, and in a split second, several hundred purple shadows flew out, all of them instantly shooting in all directions of the white fog. This was the purple abyss vine's unique technique of dividing its body into thousands of vines, and it was the quickest way to search for the core and the eye of the array in this boundless white fog. Each of the purple abyss vine subvines was connected to Heshi's divine sense. Unfortunately, this meant that each subvine was dramatically weakened compared to its usual strength, rendering it unable to attack. It also meant that if it was attacked, the damage would be relatively severe, and most of it would be inflicted on Heshi's divine sense. Soon, in as long as it takes to burn a stick of incense, and Heshi's complexion was becoming a little pale, the purple vine wrapped around her wrist began excitedly bouncing around. It was like it was eagerly trying to tell her about something. Finally, Heshi opened her eyes to reveal a sharp glint of purple swirling within their depths. In a split second, all of the purple abyss vine subvines returned to Heshi's body as fast as sharp arrows. Excellent, she had found all 64 parts of the array's eye. Unfortunately, she couldn't find the core of the array, which would have made everything a lot easier. After all, the core of the array was the array's lifeline and foundation, so no matter what kind of array it was, they were typically concealed well to prevent it from being destroyed. It was normal that the purple abyss vine couldn't find it. However, with the exact location of the 64 parts of the array's eye, it wouldn't be too complicated for her to destroy it within a short time. A corner of Heshi's mouth stretched into a faint smile, and with a light tap of her foot, she disappeared from where she stood. The location of the first part of the array's eye was nearby, so Heshi arrived beside it very quickly. The white fog surrounding the part of the array's eye was apparently a lot thicker than other areas, which made the draining of spiritual power extremely powerful. Heshi's eyes focused, and the main part of the purple abyss vine sprang out, heading towards the center of the array's eye without any hesitation. Before her, there was only a thick layer of fog, but she still heard a crash echo around her, as if something had broken. Chapter 297, Black-Clothed Man. Next, the white fog started surging around her, like a huge rock thrown into a tranquil lake. The first part of Array's eye had been eliminated. Heshi tapped her foot again, and at lightning speed, she proceeded towards the second part of the array's eye. The location of the second part of the array's eye was more remote than the first. As soon as Heshi neared it, she couldn't help but shudder. Even though it was already cold in the white fog, this area seemed to be several times colder. Moreover, even though the white fog was thick, you could still see about 3 meters ahead. However, the white fog here was so thick that there was nearly zero visibility. Heshi wiped at the water vapor gathering on her face, feeling the bitingly cold air seeping into her bones. At this moment her hair and clothes were wet, and to withstand the cold air, she had no other choice but to use her internal energy. With her powerful internal energy, she was now able to tolerate the cold environment. Heshi no longer hesitated, and the purple abyss vine sprung out from her hand in a flash. With a crash, the second part of the array's eye was broken within the white fog without mishap. Due to this, the rolling of the white fog became more violent, and its absorption of spiritual power increased to the point that it made all of Heshi's meridians tremble. She didn't dare stay any longer, so she turned around to leave. However, just as she was about to use her qinggong, her expression suddenly changed. Then, like a shadow, her figure jumped back a few steps. The thick fog in front of her still made everything hard to discern, but she could vaguely see a tall silhouette slowly approaching her. Just as Heshi was filled with bewilderment, she heard the deep voice of a man that was filled with murderous intent. "Who let you touch a part of the array's eye?" Heshi was momentarily shocked. This person also knew about the array's eye? Her brow furrowed, yet she didn't answer the man and instead raised her foot, moving to flee like a bird. "You want to escape?" The man's voice was cold as he snorted in contempt. Heshi had barely jumped into the air before an invisible force wrapped around her ankle, dragging her back. This time, an alarmed expression finally revealed itself on Heshi's face. Heshi waved her right hand without hesitation, and a purple shadow shot towards the figure within the thick fog. The purple vine trembled and waved in the air as it absorbed the spiritual power within the white fog, its momentum gradually increasing. Just as it was about to fly towards the man, it twisted itself up like a small storm, signaling its intent to shred the man to pieces by whistling through the air. However, a scene of the man being ripped into pieces didn't happen as Hashi expected. Instead, she heard the man make an exclamation of surprise in a puzzled tone before he then grabbed the purple abyss vine with one hand. After he tugged on it a few times, it was left entirely immobilized. Hashi was shocked once again, but before she could react, she felt an immense force grab her, and she abruptly tumbled forwards. With a thump, she harshly made contact with something, causing her to feel faint and her vision to blur. Her nose filled with the white fog's cold atmosphere mixed with the robust and unfamiliar scent of a man. You're just a low-level martial artist, yet you're able to control the purple abyss vine, huh? A deep, dark, and husky voice sounded above her head. Obviously, it was only a soft laugh, but it made a person's blood run cold when they heard it. Speak, who told you about the location of the array? Hashi raised her head and saw a handsome face before her, with features as sharp as a blade. The man looked to be about 24 to 25 years old, and he was dressed entirely in black. His features were undoubtedly handsome, but a callous aura surrounded his appearance. It was as if a cold and murderous spirit had crawled out of the depths of the underworld. Chapter 298, Immortal Silk. Hashi struggled and found that without her realizing, thread as thin as a strand of hair had wrapped around her body. The other end of the thread was gripped in the man's hand, and at this moment, she was just like a fish on a chopping board with no way to escape. If it were an ordinary person who was facing such a situation, he likely would be frightened and panic. However, what kind of person was Hashi? When she carried out missions in the past, she'd encountered all sorts of dangers, and had fought many different types of drug lords. A corner of her mouth stretched into a sneer before a beautiful, yet cold voice unhurriedly left her bright red lips. Such a joke. If you can find the parts of the array's eye, why can't I? Was this major cloud array created by your family? In the end, you're nothing more than a useless person who was trapped in this array and was unable to come out. The man was astonished when he heard her remark. Growing up until now, he had never encountered anyone who dared speak to him like this. After a long while, he quietly chuckled, but that laugh didn't reach his eyes. Instead, his glare was cold. Excellent, your cultivation base isn't high, yet your courage isn't small. Since you court death yourself, then I'd like to help you accomplish it. After I cripple your cultivation base, I'll use the soul search technique to get the information from you. The result is the same for you either way. As his words fell, a sharp light flashed from his hand and suddenly flew towards Hashi's heart. However, in the next moment, a shocked expression appeared on the man's face. He watched as Hashi, who was supposed to be restricted by the immortal silk and unable to budge, suddenly bent down and at a moment of life or death, avoid a fatal blow. Following that, the immortal silk restraining Hashi like glue abruptly lit up. Turning a charred color and withering away, it then fell to the ground as ash. The trace of a sneer showed on a corner of Hashi's mouth, and the purple abyss vine in her hand flew straight towards the man without any hesitation. The man was stunned and caught off guard, so he was directly hit on the chest by the purple abyss vine with a snap. If he hadn't reacted in time and quickly stepped back, perhaps his heart would have been directly hit by the purple abyss vine. But despite dodging, his upper clothes had now been shredded, exposing his bare chest, perfect skin tone, and the smooth lines of his six-pack. The man bowed his head to examine his torn clothes and the bloody cut on his chest in disbelief. He couldn't believe that he was injured by such a puny low-level martial artist. Hashi didn't look pleased though. This man before her, compared to her, had more experience and a higher cultivation base. Even if he couldn't use spiritual power within the major cloud array, Hashi didn't believe for a second that if he attacked another way that she would be able to escape again. With this thought in mind, Hashi no longer hesitated and the purple vine in her hand spun rapidly, causing the surrounding white fog to surge uncontrollably as it flew towards Hashi. In just a moment, the white fog looked like it was going to swallow her. However, in the blink of an eye, it was entirely absorbed by the purple abyss vine in her hand. The purple vine which had absorbed the white fog kept trembling and rubbing its leaves against each other, making a rustling sound as if it was telling Hashi that it wanted to drink blood. As more than half of the white fog was absorbed, the surroundings began to lighten. Yet suddenly it fluctuated, and soon after became denser. Within the white fog, the black-clothed man's face expressed clear shock. As he looked at Hashi and the flickering purple vine in her hand, his expression abruptly changed to one of understanding and excitement. Chapter 299. Escape without a trace. After building up enough force, Hashi's attack made a whistling sound as it launched through the air. Following the whistling, the purple vine abruptly transformed mid-air into many shadows, like 1,000 arrows all shooting straight towards the man. The man's eyes gleamed with a hint of admiration, but then a corner of his mouth curled up. The next second his big hand flipped over and a flag of blue so dark it seemed black suddenly appeared in his palm. There was no apparent spiritual power being emitted from the flag due to the white fog, but there was a chillingly cold aura surrounding it that could make anyone terrified. With a wave of the flag, every single purple vine was suddenly absorbed inside of it, all of them swallowed up silently and cleanly. The man lightly laughed and went to look at the youngster, but then his expression swiftly froze. There was no trace of the youngster anywhere within the thick white fog. As it turns out, the moment the purple abyss vine had attacked, he'd taken the opportunity to disappear completely. He escaped. He actually dared to escape. A sharp light sparked within the man's eyes. You think you can run away from me? In this world, no matter what he wanted, people or things, they could never get away from his grasp. As soon as the words left his lips, the man's figure disappeared, leaving only the churning white fog to indicate that something was amiss with the major cloud array. The moment Hashi had released the purple abyss vine, she'd used her qigong to escape far away. Although she was proud, she wasn't arrogant. That black-clothed man had clearly come prepared since he could use a high-level spiritual weapon without spiritual power. Coupled with the disparity in their experience, he wasn't a person she could currently win against. Hashi had initially wanted to destroy the next part of the array's eye, but she was afraid of once again being caught by that crazy black-clothed man. So hesitating for a moment, she pondered over what should she do now instead. After thinking it over for a moment, she once more released the purple abyss vine subvines, deciding to use it to find Nangong Yu and the others. With help from Nangong Yu, Gu Lufeng, and the others, she didn't believe that there was no way to destroy all 64 parts of the array's eye. However, just as she released the purple abyss vine subvines, Hashi's complexion promptly changed. As the purple vines shot out like shadows, they unexpectedly made a loud bang. When she was able to see what had occurred clearly, she noticed that they'd blocked a powerful attack. Hashi had an ashen complexion as she looked at the black-clothed man who'd appeared not far away, and coldly said, "You followed me like the spirit of a deceased person. In the end, what do you want?" The fog where Hashi was now standing wasn't as thick as it was before, so the black-clothed man could finally see the youngster's features clearly. Long eyelashes curled upwards, soft and snowy skin, beautiful lips, and long black hair that was dampened by the fog stuck to his cheeks. With such a pure appearance and brightly shining obsidian eyes, he had a countenance that could easily capture anyone's soul. Unexpectedly, it was a stunning youngster who could topple the world with just his looks. He appeared to be about 15 to 16 years old, a child who just entered adulthood but not yet 20. It turns out that it was only a tender youngster who'd forced him to such lengths, even causing him to bring out the black banner. The coldness in the black-clothed man's eyes transformed into excitement, and crossing his arms in front of his chest he arrogantly said, "I can allow you to live. However, you have to become one of my people and obey my words. If you do, I can promise you that as long as you help me to destroy this major cloud array, in the future, you'll gain benefits that you never would have imagined having in this lifetime." Hashi looked at him with a "you're crazy" look, then sneered as she said, "There must be something wrong with your brain, or were you born mentally handicapped? Why should I help you break the major cloud array? Even going so far as to make me be one of your people and obey your words? You deserve this based on what?" "Good. Very good. The black-clothed man's eyes suddenly flashed dangerously as a murderous aura condensed within them. It seems that I'll have to let you experience several defeats before you are obedient. Chapter 300. Collaborate. After he spoke, the black flag suddenly flew out and enveloped the two figures, like a cloud covering the sun. There were no apparent spiritual power fluctuations, but the densely cold aura it emitted caused Hashi to be alarmed. She felt like she was being pressured by Mount Tai and found herself unable to breathe. While this was occurring, the black-clothed man smirked and approached Hashi. As he got closer, the black flag suddenly transformed into a black shadow and also headed towards Hashi. The purple abyss vine rapidly responded by springing out to fight with the black shadow. Following that, a dark golden blade appeared in the black-clothed man's hand and shot towards Hashi. A loud bang echoed through the white fog, causing it to start violently churning. When the white fog finally settled down, you could see one black ray of light and one purple ray of light intertwined. As the light had become like two ropes, they had tightly bound Hashi together with the man. Both of their complexions were a little ashen, while Hashi's hand was clenched around a green dagger that was firmly pressed against the man's neck. Though on the other side, a golden blade was gripped within the black-clothed man's hand as it firmly pressed against Hashi's chest, as if in the blink of an eye it would pierce her heart. However, shock and amazement showed on the black-clothed man's face. His hand holding the golden blade trembled as he was unsure whether to withdraw or not. He looked at the elegant youngster with shining eyes in bewilderment, taking quite a while before saying, "You're a man." A coldness flashed in Hashi's eyes, and the dagger suddenly cut into the skin on the man's neck as she coldly said, "This dagger is smeared with the highly deadly blood-sealing throat poison. Although it's useless against a high-level martial artist, in this white fog you're unable to use spiritual power, and due to this, you won't be able to expel the poison immediately. If you still insist on harassing me, I don't mind if neither of us wins." Feeling an itchy pain from the wound on his neck, the black-clothed man's expression became sterner and a trace of anger showed on his face. "If you refuse to cooperate, do you really think that I don't have ways to deal with you?" After a brief pause, he coldly said, "If you hadn't rashly destroyed a part of the array's eye, which changed the direction of the 8-track trigrams, I would have already found the array's core and destroyed the major cloud array. Now that you've ruined my plan, shouldn't you pay the price? How about you help me break the array?" Hashi was startled for a moment, while on the contrary, the only thing revealed on her face was a slight trace of hesitation. If this man really could find the array's core, it would save her the time of breaking every part of the array's eye. Looking down, she saw that both of their bodies were tightly joined together, and in a heavy tone said, "Make your black flag release us first." The man slightly lowered his head and smelt the fresh fragrance of medicinal herbs being emitted from her body, so pursing his lips, he said, "Your purple abyss vine still restrains me too." Hashi furrowed her brows. "I'll count to 3, and then we'll release each other at the same time." In a flash, the purple abyss vine and the black flag simultaneously retreated and flicked into the air. The purple abyss vine turned into purple light and returned into Hashi's body, while the black flag returned to the man's palm. Hashi quickly stepped back to make space between them and silently took a deep breath, using this opportunity to restore her depleted internal energy. On the other side, the man felt the sudden loss of warmth within his arms and missed the subtle fragrance tickling the tip of his nose. He was somewhat disappointed at the loss for a moment. He looked up at Hashi, and the cold tone within his voice was mixed with a slight gentleness. To get rid of the major cloud array, it's necessary to find the array's core and cut off its energy supply. Just destroying 1 or 2 of the array's eyes is useless. I have a way to find the array's core. However, there is a strong spiritual power barrier surrounding the array's core. As I can't use the technique within the white fog, wanting to break through the barrier uses a large amount of effort. But if we were to use your purple abyss vine, it would be different. Chapter 301. Enemy on a narrow road. Hashi was shocked, but just as she was about to ask him how to find the array's core, her gaze suddenly focused on something in the distance. Almost at the same time, a happy voice traveled from within the white fog. "Big brother, so as it turns out, you're here." "We've finally found you." When He heard this voice, the look on her face abruptly changed and a murderous glint appeared in her eyes. That was the voice of Feng Lianying. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 figures materialized one after another from the white fog to appear in front of her. In addition to Feng Lianying, who had a look of pleasant surprise on her face, walking beside her was Nie Jinshan and some disciples of the Lu Li sect. Most of these disciples were at the peak of Meridian stage, but there were also a few low-leveled gold core stage martial artists. Besides Feng Lianying and Nie Jinshan, amongst the people with them, there was also one other person that He recognized. It was the third prince, Shangguan Rui, and his 2 gold core stage personal bodyguards that she'd met at the entrance of Hell King Manor. He's face became very unsightly. She hadn't expected that the black-clothed man would actually be Feng Lianying's older brother. Not only that, but dealing with an enemy on a narrow road, in the midst of this white fog, she had unexpectedly bumped into this vicious white lotus, Feng Lianying. Sure enough, Feng Lianying's attention was so focused on the black-clothed man that she hadn't seen He yet. But as soon as she turned her head, her beautiful eyes couldn't help but widen before she instantly uttered a scream filled with anger and resentment. "Slut! Why are you here?" He's hand clenched tightly around a vine of the purple abyss vine, while cold sweat seeped out of her palms. Although, on the surface, her face was expressionless as she sneeringly said, "Who is the slut that's calling someone a slut?" "Of course the slut is calling," Feng Lianying started saying before she realized what she'd said and stopped. She couldn't help but snarl as she took out her flying sword to stab at He. But she'd forgotten that in this white fog she was unable to use spiritual power, rendering the flying sword just like an ordinary long sword. On top of that, she was just like a useless person without enough strength to even truss a chicken. Feng Lianying had only just managed to feebly thrust the flying sword forward before He stopped it, and then without hesitation, lift her foot to fiercely kicked Feng Lianying's stomach. Feng Lianying screamed as she flew back like a kite with an abruptly snapped string before she then crashed down hard to the ground. With a deathly pale complexion, she covered her stomach and started to incessantly howl in pain. When Nie Jinshan saw that Feng Lianying was seriously injured, he was startled and filled with heartache. Quickly approaching her, he helped support her to sit up, and then stuffed a medicinal pill into her mouth. "Little sister Lianying, are you all right?" Feng Lianying clutched his wrist with her nails deeply embedding themselves into his flesh, and with a slightly hysterical voice said, "Kill him, kill that slut for me. I'll grind his bones into dust and scatter the powder." "Okay. Little sister Lianying, rest assured, I will definitely take revenge for you." With that, Nie Jinshan suddenly stood up and bellowed towards the disciples of the Lu Li sect behind him, "Kill that stinky brat and dismember his body for me. Whoever ends up killing him, I will inform the clan head and recommend that they are allowed to become an inner sect disciple." After having said that, a green disc instantly appeared in his hand. At first, the disc didn't seem to be anything remarkable. Yet, when Nie Jinshan bit the tip of his tongue and allowed the blood to drip onto the disc, it suddenly lit up with a dazzlingly bright green light. The weapon that had initially lacked spiritual power fluctuations instantly absorbed a part of the spiritual power within the white fog and began to emit an intense aura. The elegant yet frail-looking teenager stood alone in the white fog, and with the purple-colored vine in his hand shuddering slightly, a corner of his mouth curled up to form a stubborn sneer. Chapter 302, Big Brother. As 10 or so martial artists rushed towards her, He was like a lone wolf being surrounded by a group of beasts. It was clear that in the next moment she would be torn to shreds, yet she didn't cower or show any signs of fear. The disc in Nie Jinshan's hand flew directly towards He as he leapt into the air while roaring, "Go die!" The disc gave him a brief burst of spiritual power, giving him the confidence to feel that he could dismember this vile bastard's body that had wounded his little sister Lianying. But immediately after yelling, a scene occurred that shocked him to the core. The moment that disc arrived before He, it abruptly started trembling. Following that, a purple-colored shadow wrapped around it until it formed a ball. That purple shadow was, of course, a purple-colored vine and a fifth-ranked devil plant, the purple abyss vine. The purple abyss vine had been like an excited puppy as it dashed towards the disc, and in a short time, tightly wrapped its vines around it. Then, like a big mouth, the disc was swallowed whole. A crunching noise, similar to that of a chewing sound, came from the purple vine and mixed with a rustling sound caused by the purple vine swaying in excitement. In the deathly quiet fog, these sounds echoed in the surroundings and were particularly frightening. Boo! Boo! Nye Jinshin clutched his chest, which was in pain, and pointed to Heshi, asking with a trembling voice, "How can you use spiritual power within the white fog?" A smirk appeared in a corner of Heshi's mouth, and the purple vine in her hand suddenly transformed into a whip. Next, the whip fiercely slashed at the closest disciple of the Lu Li sect. That person was merely at the meridian stage, so being hit by the purple abyss vine's whip caused him to immediately wail in pain and fall to the ground, a bloody and gruesome wound visible on his body. Watching as Feng Lianying, the person who had bullied her in the secret territory, now trembled on the ground with blood flowing from a corner of her mouth, Heshi felt pleased in her heart. It seemed that this white fog wasn't entirely lacking in benefits. When Feng Lianying met Heshi's disdain-filled eyes, she was no longer able to bear it. So standing up, she at first staggered before she then rushed towards the black-clothed man, brokenly weeping, "Big brother, you must help me take revenge." The black-clothed man frowned, his expression gloomy and cold as he slowly asked, "You know him?" Feng Lianying's body was on the verge of collapsing as she gave him a sad and heartbroken look, and said in a trembling voice, "Big brother, that bastard is Shiyu. He cheated me and robbed me of my Zijin Palace inheritance. He also provoked the relationship between our Lu Li sect and Brother Yu. Obviously he's a man, but he shamelessly seduced Brother Yu. Big brother, quickly kill that bastard for me." The eyes of the black-clothed man suddenly filled with frost. As his gaze fell on Heshi, he slowly stepped forward as he asked, "You seduced Nangongyu?" Feng Lianying felt delighted in her heart. However, the expression on her face showed even more sadness and distress. "Big brother, the injuries to my body were caused by him. He also joined with Gu Lufeng of Xingda Hall to speak rudely to us of the Lu Li sect. They said that even though we were from the Feng family, we still wouldn't enter their eyes. I'm so angry it's unbearable and want to teach him a lesson. Who would have thought that Brother Yu, who has always loved me dearly, would be bewitched by such a bastard and wholeheartedly protect him? Such a lowly person who doesn't know shamelessness and is a vicious bastard like him. I will never allow him to live in this world. Big brother, please kill him for me." Nye Jinshin, who was standing to the side, quickly echoed what Feng Lianying had said with, "Young master, I personally saw Gu Lufeng injure little sister Lianying. At that time, Nangongyu not only didn't help little sister Lianying, but he instead protected this loathsome brat. You must help seek justice for little sister Lianying." Chapter 303, Leave Nangongyu? Even though it was a matter that had nothing to do with himself, Shangguan Rui couldn't help but interrupt as he stood off to the side. "I've seen this boy in Hell King Manor before. The servants there all treat him extremely respectfully. It may be assumed that his relationship with Hell King must be exceptionally intimate?" Hearing Shangguan Rui's words, Feng Lianying grit her teeth out of jealousy. But when she turned her head and saw the black-clothed man's gloomy look, a delighted smile couldn't help but spread across her face. Big brother had also hoped that the Feng family could be connected by marriage to Hell King Manor, yet now this loathsome brat had inserted himself between her and Nangongyu, destroying their relationship with Hell King Manor. How could Big brother not be angry? Even though she didn't know what trick that brat had used, it was clear that in this white fog, these people weren't his match. The only one who could kill him was her big brother, Feng Yunjing. That's right, the black-clothed man in front of her was the young master of the Feng family. Songming Kingdom's most powerful and feared man of the Feng family, Feng Yunjing. Although the Lu Li sect was one of the 4 major sects in the Mi-Luo continent, in actuality, it was all because of the influence of the Feng family. In the Lu Li sect, Feng Lianying was capable of stirring up all sorts of trouble, and yet she could still be called the young head of the sect. But compared to her big brother, Feng Yunjing, in regards to terms of privilege or strength, it was like comparing clouds to mud. From a child until now, Feng Lianying had been afraid of this half-brother. Except for Nangongyu, she had never seen a man as fearful and powerful as her big brother. Therefore, as long as her big brother was willing to help her, killing this bastard would be as simple as crushing an ant. Feng Yunjing's face was gloomy and cold, leaving his thoughts utterly unreadable as he slowly walked towards Heshi. Heshi's expression was also no longer as willful as before, but instead grave as she tightly clenched the purple vine in her hand. Feng Yunjing didn't make any moves to attack her. Instead, he slowly walked to stand in front of Heshi, then darkly said, "Shiyu, is it? Perhaps I can give you an opportunity to not die." With a brief pause, he then suddenly took a step forward, closing the distance between the two of them before he arrogantly said, "As long as you vow to leave Nangongyu and never see him again, as well as helping me to break the major cloud array, I'll let you go. How does that sound?" A corner of Hishi's mouth faintly curled upwards. "I can." Delight flashed deeply within Feng Yunjing's eyes without him realizing. However, he heard Hishi abruptly raise her voice while laughing lightly. "Of course, that's as long as you personally kill the people who offended me, who also happen to be in front of me." Her gaze fell upon Feng Lianying, and the smile on her mouth became more devilish. "As long as you personally kill Feng Lianying and Yajinshin, I will help you to break the major cloud array." You say, "How is it?" "You bastard." After hearing the conversation between the pair, Feng Lianying screamed, and regardless of everything, she rushed towards Hishi. "Bastard, I want you to die. You better die. Go die. Go die." However, Feng Lianying had barely rushed towards Hishi before she was restrained by Feng Yunjing, leaving her completely unable to move even a simple step. Feng Lianying was shocked and raised her head to stare at her big brother, then she hysterically screamed, "Feng Yunjing, even you are seduced by him. Such a shameless man. In the end, what's so good about him? Aren't you afraid that if Daddy knows?" P. The sounds of a slap echoed in their ears, and Feng Lianying was thrown to the ground by Feng Yunjing's hit. Lifting her head, she met with her big brother's dark and cold eyes, causing her to tremble all over. An unspeakable fear surged within her heart, draining her complexion to a deathly pale. "Big brother, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I said that out of anger." Feng Lianying's heart was full of fear, to the extent that her voice was trembling and making her words hard to understand. Chapter 304. Pray Feng Yunjing didn't look at her, rather, he looked towards Hishi and coldly said, "You have no option regarding this matter. Either you never see Nangongyu again and help me break the array, or, if I don't agree." Feng Yunjing's face sank, and he suddenly reached out his hand to grip Hishi's chin, forcing her to look up as he faintly sneered, "Did you use this face to bewitch Nangongyu? I see that it's indeed a feast for the eyes, but if Nangongyu were to know that you'd become one of my people, I wonder whether he would still want you or not. Arg dash." Feng Yunjing suddenly released Hishi's chin, his face ashen as he stepped backwards. Then, slowly reaching out his hand, he gently touched his earlobe. His hand unexpectedly felt something cold and damp, before he realized it was blood. A gleam of killing intent flashed within Hishi's eyes, and the purple vine suddenly sprang out from behind her. Like a curtain that covered the sky, it erected a terrifying barrier behind her. "There may be another option, and that is, you all die." Her voice was laced with bone-chilling anger and humiliation, which made her jade-white face appear bright red like a peach blossom. This unexpectedly increased her beauty, to the point that she could easily hook a person's soul. A glint flashed across Feng Yunjing's eyes, and the smile on his face was dark and overbearing with the hint of his aggressive nature, indicating his thrill to a challenge. "Very good. Never before has prey managed to escape from my hands. Shiyu, I'd like to see whether or not you can accomplish it." A blackish-blue flag sword, entangling itself with the purple vine and making it clear that they were evenly matched. A long sword appeared in Heshi's hand, and from the tip of the sword, Countless shadow swords erupted that enveloped Feng Yunjing. Such an exquisite sword technique was like an illusion that utilized one's full strength to carry it out. Obviously, there were no spiritual power fluctuations, but it was like a gorgeous dance, beautiful and magnificent. Momentarily, the sky actually changed, with clouds and mist covering the sun. Feng Yunjing moved to avoid the sword's attack, as a touch of shock and admiration flashed within his eyes. Suddenly, his body emitted a red light, while a dark rumble echoed in the sky and rang in Heshi's ears. "It's a pity, but if I were to let you continue advancing in this white fog, there's the possibility that not even I would be able to stop you. At this very moment, you are doomed to become my prey, Shiyu." As his words fell, the red light suddenly intensified, like blood condensing, before it then swept towards Heshi. The blazing atmosphere caused Heshi's steps to falter, and an amazed expression appeared on her face. There was obviously no spiritual power in the atmosphere, but when it touched her body, it was unexpectedly able to thoroughly absorb her physical energy. In just a moment, Heshi couldn't even lift her sword, and it fell to the ground with a clang. Her complexion became deathly pale, and her feet staggered as if she was about to fall. A corner of Feng Yunjing's mouth curled into a callous smile, and he extended one of his long arms to pull her into his embrace. Yet who would have thought that the moment he reached out his hand, he would be surprised? Feng Yunjing's figure rapidly retreated, but he was unable to avoid the full force of the sword wrapped in a murderous aura. This resulted in the cloth on his sleeve being torn, and a ghastly cut to appear on his arm. Heshi's body became limp, yet instead of falling to the ground, she fell into a warm embrace. A familiar scent assailed her nostrils. It was like she had finally reached a safe harbor, a place she had been longing for with great expectations. Unaware of why, Heshi felt her nose itch as she softly called out a single name, Nangongyu. Nangongyu suddenly released her to grab her shoulders, examining every inch of her for injuries. The palms that touched her body were scalding hot, and at this moment, they were shaking slightly, showing how frightened the owner of the hands was. Chapter 305. If it's unreasonable this king indulges him, Nangongyu, I'm all right. My power is just depleted, that's all. Momentarily, Heshi was unsure whether to laugh or cry. In front of so many people, in the end, until when was this guy going to continue touching her? In response to her, however, Nangongyu gathered her into his arms and tightly embraced her. "Shir. Fortunately you're all right. Fortunately I found you, Shi." Heshi felt extreme pain, like her bones were being crushed. This man was acting like he wanted to fuse her to himself, making her unable to breathe. But deep in her heart, there flowed a warmth that she couldn't precisely pinpoint, making her restless, angry, and lonely heart of a moment ago become calm. It wasn't until a good while later that Nangongyu finally loosened his hold on Heshi, then turned towards Feng Yunjing. Feng Yunjing's eyes narrowed slightly, a cold and dangerous light gleaming within them. His gaze fell on Nangongyu's hands, one of which was firmly wrapped around the youngster's slender waist, while the other was helping to tidy up the youngster's hair now and then. It also regularly drifted down to stroke his warm and tender cheek, as if confirming his existence. The youngster, who was still confronting him with bared fangs like a fierce little beast a moment ago, was now nestled in Nangongyu's arms, looking utterly adorable and docile. The two people standing together and cuddling seemed like a pair of jade annulus made in heaven, both male and female as beautiful as a painting. So beautiful, it was unpleasant to the eye. Before Feng Yunjing had a chance to say anything, Feng Lianying's voice was heard sobbing behind him. "Brother Yu, why do you only care about whether or not young master she was injured? I was ambushed by him just a moment ago, and until now, my stomach is still in a lot of pain. Aren't you concerned about me even a little bit? In your heart, do our feelings for each other over so many years not even compare with this treacherous boy?" Heshi raised her eyebrows, and she couldn't help but step backwards from the hands that were looped around her body. Yes, she had just beaten up Feng Lianing. Moreover, after she'd finished beating her up, until now, she'd felt very pleased. She would like to see how Nan Gongyu would react when he saw that his beloved little sister Lian Ying had sustained an injury, and what's more, it was caused by her. Seeing her wanting to get away from him, Nan Gongyu's face sank. Suddenly, he reached out his hands to pull her back, firmly imprisoning her in his arms. His icy cold eyes landed on Feng Lianying, and slowly speaking with a calm tone, he said, "Shi'er is one of this king's people. Anything that he does, if it's justified, this king lets him do as he pleases. If it's unreasonable, then this king indulges him." Chapter 306. Just a warning. This man had repeatedly humiliated her and made her angry to the point where she wished she could dismember his body. Due to her anger, her eyes shone bright like stars, while her lips were as delicate and exquisite as rose petals. Her skin was like sparkling and translucent jade flushed with a scarlet peach blossom color. Such world-shaking beauty was bound to stand out from the masses. Seeing the scene in front of him, Feng Yunjing became somewhat crazy, and an intense urge to monopolize him bloomed within his heart. This person, he wanted him. The purple abyss vine in Heshi's hand shook violently as if at any moment it would be unable to resist intervening. However, Nan Gongyu moved faster than her, and a long, black sword appeared in his hand, its sharp end pointing straight towards Feng Yunjing. Even though a gentle and noble smile hung on his face, the coldness in his eyes seemed to emphasize his feelings of wanting to tear the man before him to shreds. "Feng Yunjing, did you forget? Outside of the secret territory, you're not my match." He paused, and the curve at a corner of his mouth became more gentle but seemed to emit a bloodthirsty feeling that could make anyone's hair stand on end. "In this major cloud array, your cultivation base is worthless. If I wanted to take your life, it would be as easy as flipping my hand." That said, a blinding green ray of light burst from his body. Following this, his figure abruptly disappeared from where he'd stood. Blood refining body cultivator of the 4th rank. One of the disciples of the Lu Li sect couldn't help uttering a roar of horror. Wasn't Hell King a high-level spiritual cultivation martial artist? Why is he also a blood refining body cultivator? No one with a dual soul cultivation base had appeared for over 1,000,000 years. In the end, to what extent was Hell King's true strength? Shock also emerged in Feng Yunjing's eyes, and he rapidly stepped backwards to summon all kinds of spiritual weapons to his hands. However, in comparison, Nan Gongyu's long sword was faster and more ruthless. The sword arrived at where Feng Yunjing was standing, and before he was able to transfer all his spiritual power to the spiritual weapons, they all fell to the ground with a clatter. Feng Yunjing's eyes finally revealed no small amount of shock. Just as he wanted to open his mouth to speak, a field of overwhelming power seemed to envelop him. This caused his expression to become deathly pale and his throat to be blocked, making him unable to utter a sound. If they were outside of the major cloud array, he didn't believe that he would lose to Nan Gongyu. Plus, coupled with all the spiritual weapon arrays left in the hands of the Feng family, it absolutely wouldn't be an easy task for Nan Gongyu to take advantage of him. But this major cloud array could absorb a person's spiritual power to the last drop, leave only a smidgen of spiritual power to remain in spiritual weapons, and reduce other types of weapons to scrap iron. He himself couldn't even display 1/10 of his usual strength. Feng Yunjing's complexion turned an unsightly shade before his gaze swept over to Heshi, who was standing nearby and watching. Shock and anger, plus a surge of fighting spirit, rose within his heart. He was unwilling to lose face in front of him. Seeing Nan Gongyu's powerful sword, Nye Jinshin, who had been foolishly watching all this time, suddenly sobered and shouted, "Nan Gongyu, have mercy!" However, Nan Gongyu didn't seem to hear him. The sword suddenly thrust forward and severely pierced Feng Yunjing's left shoulder. Yet while it had missed his heart, it was still dangerously close to it. A deadly silence descended within the white fog. The sound of the sword piercing flesh still rung in their ears. Everyone was frightened by Hell King's horrible strength and ruthlessness, so for a moment, they all kept quiet out of fear. Nan Gongyu withdrew the black sword, and coldly said, This time was just a warning, but next time, you won't be so lucky. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.